Okay.
Mockery and Version have their place.
Yeah.
LBM to the other side of the airport. Transportation scene.
We're being recorded. You can't do anything mean to me now.
Oh, that's not
Don't
cool.
let anybody.
Can't. As long as the government's not what. It could be.
I completely do not know what,
Actually accomplished it.
So the problem
because it was a roll of things.
the problem is it was out in like the back 40 where the sinkhole is, and I hit that fence by avoiding a like 3 foot taller roll of fence that I could see, and I was in the middle of the bushes. And I couldn't see anything, so I avoided that one, and I could see that one.
Yeah.
Alright, it's 5 o'clock. As we all know, I like to start on time. Last week, we did things a little differently, and it went faster than I was expecting. So we're kind of ahead of, interestingly, we're ahead of where I had meant to be on the syllabus. And so next week, we're going to start doing weather pretty heavy, I think. I have to look at I gotta go back and look at the syllabus again. But, so this week, we're going to do, so the order of things, a work in progress round 2. So it includes kind of all the chapters we've done through 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So understanding approach charts, approach chart analysis, GPS approach charts, instrument departures, and then en route charts. And mostly what we're going to do today is everybody's going to bust out your iPads, your whatever planning tools you have, and yeah, you're left out. I have 4Play. You have 4Play now. Okay. So, right, and we're going to kind of plan a route as a group, and we'll discuss like what departure we would take, and then we'll follow it on the low route chart. And then we will talk about the arrivals and anything else that we could come across, and just look for things that make you go, I don't know what that means. I don't know what is this? What am I going to do here? The other thing that we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about communications. Everybody's afraid of the radios. It's like in the top 5 things that gets discussed on CFI channels online. Is how much people are afraid of talking on the radios. And so, I want to open today off with, we had a good flight this morning, did we not? And could you talk to them a little bit about what happened and like what your epiphany was?
So we flew out on the Carps 2 Carps departure, and we got down there. I couldn't see a whole lot other than my gaze, so that's all I could see. But we were gonna do a hold out by the Carps intersection, and we had flight following from about Sandpoint on, and we got into a situation where there's clouds in front of us, very serious clouds, and we decided we were going to turn around. Well, when we picked up flight following, we had flight following, and then just as we were about to turn around, they radioed us and said, contact Spokane approach. And Bill got on the radio and said, we are just about to turn around. Can we just stay with you? And he said, well, can you turn around in the next 1 minute? Is that? Yeah, I think that's what he said. And he said, Bill told him, we are actively turning around now. And we did a 180 and headed back. The guy said, okay, just stay with me and thanks for letting me know. And we stayed with Seattle Center and headed back, and then we decided to do the RNAV into runway 2. And there was a fairly, it wasn't very thick cloud there, but it was, I could see the ground below us. And so we picked up a pop-up approach into Bonners Ferry. We called it ATC, or I guess it was, Seattle Center, right, was it Hitru is where we picked it up?
Yeah, right at the initial approach fix.
Yeah, we were about
3 minutes from the initial approach fix.
3 minutes away. We picked it up and were able to fly the approach in until we got below the clouds, and then we got below the clouds within 10 minutes. And then we canceled our approach in by just radioing ATC to cancel the approach, and then we just floated the approach in the rest of the way under the hood. But it was my personal, when I was scared, when he told me this morning that I was going to have to talk to flight following, I was pretty nervous about that. And then just listening to him on the radio, I had the same thing with Nicole when I was doing my private pilot stuff. It seems so scary until one of them starts talking to ATC like it's a phone call or a conversation, and then it seems a lot less scary. And even with them telling Bill, thanks for letting us know, it just makes.
Well, that was the funny one when they were handing us off to Spokane, and I said, "Hey, we're going to turn around in just a minute. Do you want us to stay with you instead?" He goes, "Are you going to turn within a minute?" And I said, "We're already turning." And he goes, "Thank you for letting me know. This will be easier." And so, kind of a big takeaway I want for you: it's not an adversarial event. All right, you have a conversation, you negotiate out what you want to do. When we picked up flight following, it was really hard to hear. He had to give us our squawk code 3 times because they just would drop out, those sorts of things. As long as you're polite, it goes pretty smoothly. So. All right, so last week we threw up, I don't know why this isn't working the way we did it. I don't know, but was that you?
No, that was over here.
What are you talking about? So the basic order of things, right? You got to do your route planning, and we're going to talk heavy weather analysis for 2 weeks after this. So we are not going to dig down that rabbit hole today. But your route planning, use the tools you got available to you. You guys did 2 cross countries this weekend, right?
Just one.
Just one? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but then one of you flew instrument, the other one safety piloted, and then you turned around and flew back, right?
Yep.
When you guys were showing me the plan, you kind of planned it, we'll call it VFR style.
Yeah.
Where, I'm going to go airport to airport, I'm going to follow the valleys and that kind of thing. It's kind of hard to do that IFR because radar doesn't get down that low. So around here, IFR routes are different than VFR routes. You're taking on different risks and you're gaining different protections. All right, and you use different tools to work around it. One of them is altitude. You try to get altitude around here for flying IFR. Which is a little tricky in airplanes that, cap out at 12,500 feet and they're done climbing. But, so you guys ended up changing your route, if I remember right.
Like 4 times.
But yeah.
Mid-flight, actually, he's giving me vectors and stuff. There's weather in the way, so.
Yeah, well, that's
good.
What's the number 1 rule of the safety pilot?
Yeah, look outside.
Yep, your job is to look outside and not fly into the cloud.
They don't teach
Unless, if you are instrument rated, you can do like we did today and do a pop-up and come in. Kelly flies up, has flown on my ticket several times, and we've just flied. And we go. Now, the 2 big long flights we did, beautiful clear days that she didn't get to see anything. All right, but so route planning is different though. If you go out east, route planning for an IFR and a VFR flight looks very, very similar most of the time because these little planes, you're going to want to stick around 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet anyway. They just function better at that altitude, and out there's nothing to run into at those altitudes. Out here, if you don't get above 11,000 feet, you run into a hill. So ruins your day. Go, no-go decision. One thing I do want to talk about today is personal minimums. Before any of you go to a check ride, I want you to do a formal personal minimums worksheet. It goes towards ADM, so aviation decision making, those kinds of things. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you the hypocrite standing up here because I've never filled one out, but I have personal minimums that are set down. I won't do any landing that is lower than 700 feet AGL. I won't shoot the approach if the weather is below 700 feet AGL, even though you can go down to 200 feet, because I don't feel comfortable doing that. I won't land anywhere if the winds are more than 15 knots direct crosswind. unless I just don't have a choice. And then it's an educational day for me. But when I'm looking at my weather, those are the kinds of things I'm looking at. I have landed in 45 knot headwinds in a 340. I would never do that in a 172. They just don't fly the same. Does that make sense?
You're going backwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for all of you, I want you to be able to walk into your check ride, having given that all serious thought and going, okay, these are the crosswinds I'm comfortable, these are the headwinds I'm comfortable with, this is the ceiling I'm comfortable with, having done this right now, And the worksheet, I have one that's officially from the FAA, like all things FAA, you kind of look at it and you're like, it was a good idea, could have been executed better. So that may be something that will tear apart like the last day is just how you want to go through that. But pre-flight and then starting. So Callie showed up with a new checklist that she'd handmade. I think that's a great idea to go through the checklists and then tailor them for you and the mission you're flying on. I like to do them on my iPad. So I have, like my 340, I have really detailed checklists all the way to include. I have 4 cruise checklists that are in there. They're the exact same checklist 4 times. So I do them every hour because we fly for up to 5 hours. So it just makes me go back through the checklist very deliberately. One of the things that I notice in sim and on the ground for a lot of you is you will set the radios. You need to add the word and GPS to that thing because almost without fail, we all want to take off without the GPS set with the route that we're actually going to fly. And so that should come right after you're going to pick up your clearance. Right? Because there's not a lot of sense in dialing in a super long, complicated route if ATC is going to change it on you. And you all need practice with dialing in 430s. The good news is the TD2 has a 430 on it. So you could literally come in and sit down and just, this is the route I want to fly, dial it in, and then go and change it. Like alter the route several times in the TD2. That was kind of kicking your butt today, if I remember right. So, all right, so starting, clearance delivery, taxi, run up, and then when we're doing our little exercise today, we'll go through the takeoff. So takeoff, departure. I had you do a 0-0 takeoff this morning, didn't I?
Right rudder.
Yeah, right rudder, buddy. It's set the heading bug. I'm not advocating for doing 0-0 departures. What I'm saying is it is legal. And so you should learn what actually happens when you do it. And if you were like 1 degree pointed to the left and he was going to drive us off the runway. And I let him go for quite a ways because I was like, you try to peek out over the nose and see if you can see the stripe down the center.
You just look at the little instrument as the.
Yeah,
It's not.
Oh, I was sure
It's
it was
not
that.
correct.
you want to make sure that you've got everything lined up straight. All right. Let's see. So departure in. All right. So we've talked through all of these things before. Another one that was kind of several of you have experienced. The way I do this when we're flying in, if I don't tell you you can see the runway, you can't see the runway. I don't know how Perry's going to do that, but that's mine. And so I want you to immediately execute the missed approach at the missed approach point. Don't ask me. Don't ask, can I go missed? Callie did ask me, do I see the runway? And I just said no. And then she went missed. That's what I expect. And I expect you to fly the missed approach properly. Like what it actually says. The missed approach here does not start with a straight climb. You are not even lined up with the runway. It starts with a climbing left turn. All right? And so something that I did not put on my slide last week, it's on that slide this week, and we'll see it again at the end. I call it the 5 C's, because that's how I was taught. Cram, climb, clean, call, suspend. It's not. Your GPS at 4:30 will not auto sequence past the missed approach point unless you push the OBS button. And if you look above it, it says suspend. What that means is that the radio has gone into suspend mode, and it is no longer auto sequencing waypoints. If you hit the suspend button, I think it was, oh no, it was you saw that it brought back the entire missed approach.
Yeah.
It's all programmed in there. You just have to get it turned back on so that you can fly it. If you don't hit the suspend, you got no navigation aid from your GPS. Now the instructions for this departure or this approach require GPS. You can't fly it without it. So you have to hit that button. If you reach over and hit something else, you will clear out all that information. And now you're in the soup, not able to land, trying to guess how to aim back towards WebDev and get going the right way. Now, here I would tell you, turn to 180 and climb, and you're pretty close. And then taxing and securing. All right. So within this list, where do we think we're going to have conversations with somebody outside of the airplane?
Pre-flight?
Clearance delivery.
Clearance delivery is one. I'm going to start much earlier than that. The first one you actually have is at the end of route planning. You have to file the route. Okay, that is a communication. It's weird now. We used to pick up the phone and call them in. It just almost make you guys do that. I don't know. I don't know if there's value to it though anymore because nobody does it. We use ForeFlight or a service. Get everything in the ForeFlight, and then you submit your route plan through Duats or Duat, whichever one you're subscribed to. But that is a communication with FSS. Okay, so consider that communication. All right, and let's see. I have a note here, weather sources. This is more when you're on your test, you're going to get asked where the weather information is coming from. So that is technically a communication, but it's from NOAA, the National Oceanic.
Fun if you call the weather briefer, I mean.
You could call a weather briefer. And it used to be that when you filed, you could get your weather briefing at the same time. You call well, you still can. You can call 1-800-WX-BRIEF. But so I put that under comms. All right. And then my next one was clearance delivery. That's almost always the next communication you have. And we've all learned CRAFT, or in my case, CRAFT-V. What are the 3 ways that you pick up most clearances? Mayor, give me one.
By phone?
Okay. Callie?
In the air.
Okay.
At the tower.
With the tower. And that's really what they are. That's not like the official answer. That one's not going to be on your test. But the 3 ways you do it, we do it on if we're at a non-towered airport and we need it while we're on the ground, we almost always try to do it by phone. It's the easiest and most efficient. If, for any reason, you're at a non-towered airport and it's just more conducive to get off. Callie and I had one the other day where there were like 5 people doing run-ups and it had turned into a weird cluster. Am I wrong?
No, it was
It was a cluster, and I said, okay, I want to get out of here, and then we'll pick up. And so you get out, you take off, then you need to know things like what frequency should you be on to pick it up, and that you have to be VFR until you pick up your clearance. So that's in the air. The other thing is we did the variation of that is the pop-up. It's where you don't have a flight plan in the system, so you're doing it in conjunction with calling them on the radio. When you do a pop-up, you should always be extremely polite and deferent. You just understand you are asking for a favor, and they don't have to do it. Do we know what they could have made me do? This is actually a virtual question.
Contact flight service on the radio to get the flight plan request filed and then pick up a.
Yeah, change frequencies, do orbits, get a hold of flight service. And flight service specifically is there for you to file. I have never, ever called flight service on a radio.
Ever?
Nope.
Okay, so back in the old days,
Yeah.
if you were flying from here to Seattle and you didn't know what the weather at Payne was, you'd call flight service saying, hey, could you give me the weather at my destination? And they would help you by telling you the weather.
I had a
I
portable
heard so.
Garmin with XM.
Right.
And so it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, if your XM's ever down,
Yeah.
flight service will happily do that. What they will not do is give you a practice direction file. They don't have that equipment anymore.
Dude, you shouldn't have spoiled it. I've told so many people in this room to go and do that.
So, all right, so we got clearance delivery, and then, if you do clearance delivery through the tower, you're going to do it on the radio. And depending on where you are, the order gets changed up sometimes. Sometimes you'll have to do a taxi request, and then request the clearance. Most often you'll ask for the clearance delivery first. They'll give you clearance. Sometimes clearance delivery is a separate frequency. Sometimes it's on the ground frequency. And on very rare occasions, ground and tower are the same frequency. But you'll get clearance delivery, and then you'll have to taxi. And they'll tell you where to taxi to. And then when you get done taxiing, and you're ready to go, what do? And so you're at the run-up area. You've already got a clearance.
Ready for takeoff?
At a tower at an airport?
Yep, at a tower and airport.
Holding short, awaiting IFR release.
The big trick there is you have to taxi from the run-up area over to the hold short. And then you switch to tower. They don't wait for permission. You do not switch to tower until you're at the hold short line. Which actually, this is a good time for me to hit a pet peeve, because a couple people have done this to me. When you land and taxi off the runway, since you're shaking your head, what am I about to say?
Wait till you're clear to say you're clear, very clear.
Your entire aircraft must be completely across the hold short lines before you say that you have cleared the runway, because you are not cleared the runway if any part of your airplane is across the line. When you taxi up to the hold short, there is no award for being the closest person in the history of man to the hold short, but there is an award for crossing the hold short line, and it's a phone number.
Yay!
So, don't play with the hold short lines. And I get on people here because while I was at school at Phelps Field, I know 4 people that got violated. They had, because they stopped before they were completely across the hold short and switched over to ground. 4 different people. It's a common problem, and more importantly for us, if you do it on the check ride, they have to bail you automatically if you don't actually clear the runway. So don't stop until you're completely across. Also, it's good practice once you're completely across, come to a complete stop, do the radio call, and run through your after landing checklist. Because almost invariably, you guys have picked up something that you skipped. You know, I think you asked me today too why I don't like to do them on the runway, like while we're moving. What did I tell you?
It's okay pushing the carb heat, but the most common issue with, or the most common reason for landing retracting is you flip the landing gear up instead of the flaps.
Yeah, when you move up to retractable gear aircraft, the #1 cause of post-landing gear retraction is retracting the flaps while you are still on the runway. Because you're still bouncing, and you can pull that and it will open the squat switch and the gears will pop up on you. So if you are stopped, I got an answer to your question earlier that says it's not his.
What?
Okay.
Wait a second.
The pose.
I understand.
A little context would be nice there.
That's actually more fun. So,
You don't need to give any context, there's no wonder.
there you go.
Explain myself to you.
So, the reason the modern flat panel is shaped like a wedge and the gear retraction lever is shaped like a tire is supposed to be that it's supposed to keep you from doing this. If you search YouTube, you will find all kinds of videos of people pulling the landing gear up when they shouldn't. And I know of a DPE who a student was taking a check ride, and the DPE says, "I'll get your flaps," and he grabbed the landing gear and pulled them up, and the guy bellied it during his check ride.
Whose fault is that?
It was the DPE. He said the DPE lost his examiner status permanently. More because he tried. They removed the plane from the runway, and he tried to just offer to replace it without ever reporting it, and that's a violation of NTSB regulations. So, I forgot where I was now. When you get taxi clearance, you are required to read back all cross-runway crossings. Any hold short instructions, all of those have to be read back. And we talked about this a little bit last week. If you're crossing a runway and you are not 100% sure, stop, call, and ask. They would much rather have you stop, call, and ask and look a little bit silly than make an assumption and roll across in front of some plane that's taken off. So,
They don't like the paperwork either.
yeah, oh, nobody does. Holy crap. So Clint taxi run up. So then en route, you're going to have what are called routine handoffs. What's a routine handoff? Callie.
Okay, so you're flying from here to Coeur d'Alene. Initially, we're going to talk to Seattle Center. They're going to hand you off to Spokane at some point when you get into their little area of airspace that they control for instrument flight. Same thing if you're flying from Seattle, or from here to Kalispell, then they'll hand you off to Salt Lake. So,
And how do those go?
19698, contact Seattle Center on 123.95.
And so then you change the radio, you switch over. What do you say next?
I call out my altitude, so I would say, what did I say? Seattle? So I'd say Seattle Center, Skyhawk November 19698, level 11,000.
Okay. You know, she said level 11,000. That is the best way to do it. A lot of people just say the number, and that is acceptable. That's perfectly fine, unless you are climbing or descending. And then you should say 11,000 climbing 15,000, or 11,000 descending 10,000. Whatever the answer is. You will notice I do not say 2 or 4. Like, I'm not descending to 2,000 because it gets confusing. Try to eliminate those prepositions from your vocabulary. They are unnecessary. So,
Stop me if
but
I'm
the whole
wrong.
check, what's that?
When you get passed over, they have to confirm your altitude anyway, so it kind of just eliminates another radio call.
Yep. And so, and if you say it, they know that you know what you're doing. And what will their response be, Callie?
They'll probably give you an altimeter setting.
They will invariably give you an altimeter setting if you're below 18,000 feet. And they will just simply say November 19698, Kalispell altimeter 29902. And you are expected to immediately dial that in, and your response to them
29902, 19698.
is what they told you and who you are. That is the routine handoff. And you're going to do that every time you move from one controller space to another controller space. What if I make this bigger so it's easier to read? All right. And then hold instructions. I'm actually going to bring up a slide later about what you should expect on a hold. But if you go into ForeFlight, into the Scratchpad page, they offer you a little cheat sheet. And so I do this thing to you guys in the sim and the airplane that I need to stop doing. I will tell you, okay, I want you to hold here, blah, 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 blah. You never get hold instructions cold. They will always say something to you like, hey, we have an issue with some weather up ahead. I have hold instructions for you. Tell me when you're ready to copy. So you have a second to pull your stuff out. It would behoove you to do it as quickly as possible and to be organized, because the less time you spend screwing around getting set up, the sooner they can tell you what your hold instructions are, and the longer you have to figure out what you're going to do. Usually, they will try to hold you in a way that makes sense. Like, give you a hold that is a direct entry on the route you're on, and they just have you orbit somewhere, that kind of thing. Or they'll give you a published hold that's in your database. Alright? So, hold instructions. Also, while en route. Okay, I have a note here for radar versus non-radar environment. What does that mean? Has anybody ever heard the term radar services lost? Radar services terminated? What does that mean?
I can't see you.
Probably. Or if you're VFR and you were on a VFR flight following, what does it mean?
Then it means you're no longer getting flight following.
Because they don't have enough work. There's too much going on. So they cut you off. But if you're IFR, if they say IFR contact lost, then you go into this thing where you have to report specific points. All right? And we will talk about how to report those. Okay, arrival. Last week we talked about this. What is the difference between cleared via and descend via?
Cleared via is you just follow the lateral direction or the lateral guidance of whatever arrival you're on. Descend via means you follow the lateral and the step downs.
Exactly. And that's the answer there. And then descend via except is if they give you a different floor. They might tell you to descend via this except cross this point at this altitude. When we got our approach in today, the normal crossing for Hitru is 8,600 feet. We were at 9.5 and they had us cross it at 9. I don't know why they needed us 400 feet higher today, but that was the instruction. So we follow the instruction. All right, when you're on approach, what's the difference between being vectored and being on a feeder route?
The feeder route is shown on the chart. It has an altitude and a heading wherever you go, something that you're following, the waypoint you're going towards. And being vectored, ATC is verbally telling you the direction and probably altitude they want you to fly.
Absolutely. So the vast majority of real-world approaches today are done vectored because they're faster. It is faster, smoother, easier for them to vector you onto the approach than it is to have you fly what's called the full approach. The feeder routes are there in case you have lost comms or if workload is super heavy, and then they'll put you on feeder routes. If you're on a feeder route, you may have a procedure turn. Unless the feeder route specifically says no PT. If you are being vectored, you do not have a procedure turn. You'll be vectored and it will vector you onto the final approach course much closer in than you would expect it to get it if you're on a feeder route. All right?
Question.
Yes.
So, like the Sandpoint 2.0, you come at that from north of Sandpoint, and I'm assuming they don't have radar there. So, have you flown IFR into Sandpoint on the 2.0? Do they typically vector you, or do they have you fly the full approach?
It was my full approach.
Because they'll lose radar.
Yeah, the radar contact in these holes is crazy. So that you always get the full approach coming into here.
Okay.
So good point. No, good point though. Terrain specific. Flying into Spokane, though, they're probably going to vector you in the Geiger. Coeur d'Alene, there's a good chance you'll get vectored because you're in Spokane Approach's control zone. But no, you're very often given the full approach in remote areas, especially if they're GPS approaches. Because GPS approaches are also optimized. They're designed to be more efficient. Great question, though, Virgil. All right, vector feeder. All right, and then on landing, when you land at a towered airport, you are cleared to land. What happens when you land at a non-towered airport? And you're on an IFR approach.
Close your flight today.
If you didn't close the flight plan in the air, yes, you have to close the flight plan afterwards. And you do that either by radio or by phone on the ground.
You're responsible for making the radio call on CTAF that you're landing.
That you're coming in, and if there's VFR traffic, you are responsible for blending in with the VFR traffic. Just because you came in on an approach like today, we flew a genuine approach, but 16 miles out I could see the airport again. You don't get to just be an asshole. Alright?
As much as everyone would like.
You get right of way in IFR traffic, but not necessarily.
But if it's VFR at the airport you're going to, and it doesn't have to be full VFR, because it could just be, that 1,000-foot ceiling, guys doing work in the pattern stuff. Yep, you are expected to get on the CTAP. They will always tell you that to switch to advisory frequency. You get on CTAP, you need to listen, look, pay attention, that sort of thing. So my note was cleared versus advised. And then missed approach, the 5 C's. What are the 5 C's?
Cram.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Does anyone else want to add anything?
Climb.
So cram, climb,
Twist. I mean,
call.
I can't do that. What do you say?
Crim, climb, clean, call, suspend.
Yes,
Right.
C-SPAN.
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 Not C-SPAN. All right, then when you taxi holding, okay.
What is twist from?
The T's.
Oh, the top T's.
Turn
Turn twist, turn time twist, throttle clock track.
Yeah.
So,
16.
60s. It's the NAI 60s because if you go, there are other different 60s too.
Soon we're going to get to the 2016.
There we go. All right. So the order of things. All right. These are the routes we're going to do today. So why don't you just get your iPad out? We're going to do one route. So 65 Sierra to KGPI.
Stop. I can't turn it on. I'm trying to figure it out.
Can do what?
The sound. We're trying to figure this out. Like,
It's in settings, dude.
You can't
on the
turn it
phone, there's a
on?
little button that you just, and it's gone.
Keyboard, just
A
keyboard.
little like tapping sound. Just, you
Oh, it's a setting.
Yeah. Keyboard clicks.
Yep, turn the keyboard clicks off.
I have like all my own.
Would you look at that? So why do they change it from the phone? It's a Steam company. Why do we gotta do this?
Because they got to sell a new one.
Guess that's
They changed the plugins.
Virtual, you don't work for Apple, do you?
No.
Just check it
No.
Making sure.
Yeah, we can't have it.
I did get sucked into the Apple ecosystem after years and years of being an Android person.
Because of ForeFlight,
Yeah. Yeah. The
mostly.
bigger tablet screen.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah, is that an iPad?
Ooh, like that.
That's insane.
That was a TV.
That's insane.
Yeah, what they
You bring that in the plane?
72 inch.
I want a little smaller than that for flying.
Very
Yeah.
small.
So this is, I call this my planning iPad,
Oh, I see.
and then my flying iPad.
After trying to
Very
play those
interesting.
here,
That's a
I think
good
I'm
size.
on that
Yeah.
size.
What's that?
After playing one here, I think I would get to that size there.
This is the
Yeah.
first.
I just don't know.
If you fly 172s, the iPad Mini is like the perfect size.
This stupid phone's almost that big. I was planning routes on it, and I get this thing, and it's just like, I can't even run it with one hand anymore.
There you go. Okay. So, they got a route that they've selected, tweaked, or do you just have a straight line between 2 points?
I have. Are we talking about VFR route?
I have.
That's all good.
Yeah.
Little straight line.
Okay, so notice I do not have the. So I'm using ForeFlight Web, so it looks a little different, but it's not a lot different. Yeah, if you're planning IFR, you want to do it on a low route chart. All right, so that's the first thing. Second thing is, yeah, throw the route on there just straight line. You could get that. Now, what I'll tell you is it's not super efficient to fly it out of here most of the time because of the terrain. So Callie's got something going on there. What did you get?
So I've got 650, the CARPS departure out, and then a route that's already been cleared in the past for a piston was CARPS to Class to Olaby, and then Glacier Park.
Yeah, I just had straight to view.
Spell Olaby, O-L-I.
Oliby.
Oh, Libby.
Ta-da.
Oliby.
What is it?
Class to all of you.
Yeah. CARPS to Class.
So you're kind of just following the.
So you got the departure procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say CARPS to CARPS, that's saying we're taking the CARPS to departure procedure to the CARPS intersection. All right. Here it seems redundant because that's the only option we have. But other places you can get on a departure procedure, and they've got different departure vectors that will work out better for you. Yeah, I found this same route earlier. Route Advisor is your friend. So on your iPad, go point to point and hit Route Advisor and see if there's routes that you're like, hey, that makes sense, that looks good. Also, could somebody just give me point to point what the time would be with 19 or 69 or 8?
Where's Route Advisor?
So Route Advisor is going to be on the right. I got
But
about an
underneath it
hour
says
route.
And then that one.
So go to edit
So flight
Underneath
plan.
performance.
Yeah.
routes. Yep, and then it gives you routes, and see this is CARPS 2, CARPS.
Oh, the class all of you. That's cool.
Yep. So what those are is those are routes that have been approved by the FAA in the recent past. All right.
Did you get the point to point already?
Take me.
Yeah. What was the point to point time?
1 hour, 85 nautical miles.
Yep. That's
So
right.
1 hour.
You'll get 1 hour. An hour and 50.
On the point.
This is
Oh.
Direct.
So and then this route takes an hour and 32, according to. Now that also depends on how you have what data you have in the system for that airplane. So this is, I have 19 or 69 or 8 up there. I would guess it's actually a little more than an hour to just fly there.
Mine says an hour 54.
Mine
So for the whole
Yeah,
thing.
wonder what power settings you have.
Did you put your weight and balance and stuff in there yet? See,
So-
all that kind of stuff will turn off too. So. Didn't know if you're full.
But what you want, so short routes, these changes make it look like it's a big change. When you get on a long route, if you ever fly to Las Vegas, for example, you will not get a direct straight line route because there's a whole bunch of military activity areas for Nellis out there. And so you get routed around those, and you look at the route and like, oh my god, and then you find out it added 7 minutes. It's just the way it is. All right, so we got a route. We know the departure that we're going to use is going to be the CARPS to CARPS departure, right? What is CARPS to CARPS? How does that departure work? Hold the plate.
Check off runway 20. Climb heading 202 to 2,840. Then direct to Zacny. Then on pick your route to CARPS, cross CARPS at or above NEA for assigned route flight.
Okay. So the little tiny rectangle up here is the runway. Heading 202 degrees until 2,840 feet. Then direct Zacny. If you look very carefully when you take off, the heading to Zacny from this end of the runway is 204 degrees. But when you get to the other end of the runway, it's apparently 202 degrees. Because,
magnetic moves.
yeah, but I'm telling you, it's end of the runway at 202 degrees almost perfectly sets you up to go to Zacny anyway. But you need to understand that first 500 feet of climb, you are not supposed to be using the GPS to guide you. You fly with your magnetic heading based off of your heading bug until you hit that altitude so that you avoid the trees and crap at the end of the runway. They don't want you drifting left of center line, that kind of stuff. All right, but then we do a little left turn at Zacny to 181. Now, you'll notice on here, some of them will have a top altitude, and that is something to pay attention to. If we get told to stop there. What does this tell us to fly to?
On this one, 2,840
No, what's the top altitude?
or the top MEA.
It's in the text.
Take off.
5,500.
Oh, no.
No?
5,500. You have to be able to climb at 245 feet per nautical mile to 5,500 to fly this route.
It doesn't tell you the actual altitude.
But
It tells you how to figure out the altitude. Very last sentence.
MEA?
Cross carts at or above the MEA for the assigned route of flight.
Okay, so when you get to CARPS, if you are not at the MEA, you have to hold at CARPS and climb. And there's no depicted hold. Now the truth is, even the 172 can get to the MEA from here. Because it's a long way to CARPS. How long does it take to fly to CARPS? Anybody know?
45 minutes.
About 45 minutes. In the 172. And that's if we're doing a 90 mile an hour cruise climb. All right. So you note here, you have to have GPS. Specifically, it has to be a terminal-enabled GPS. That's what RNAV 1 tells you. So you have to have RNAV 1. RNAV 0.03 is final approach. And anybody know what en route is? What RNAV code is en route? 2, if it's WAS enabled. And 3, I believe it's 5. I just forgot. Non-WAS is a bigger number. I think it's 5. All right. So we've all. I know you've flown this departure. You've flown this departure. You've flown this departure. Have you done it in the sim yet? No. Okay. Tomorrow, you will fly this departure tomorrow. I know you've flown it a couple times. So. This is one that I'm going to tell you when you walk into your exam, you need to know this plate backwards and forwards because you're guaranteed to have this departure on your exam if you take your ride here. Because you have to leave from here. And it's the only approach available to you, or departure available to you. All right. So looking at the en route phase, so that part of the route took us all the way up to here. All right, and we would have filed at least 10,000 feet. Now we're going east.
So probably 11.
There you go. All right. Now, how do we know? Oh, I'm gonna back
We
up.
don't, thank you.
What's that?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Exactly. So you got cleared on the ground. You picked up your clearance from clearance delivery on the ground, right? And they say cleared as filed. Lovely. And so we fly up this way here, and we fly over here. Well, cleared as filed takes us direct from Olaby to Kalispell Glacier, right? How do we know what approach we're going to fly?
We don't.
Okay.
we listen to weather, and
Okay.
they'll give us a runway.
So if you're flying into a tower at airport that has an ATIS, the ATIS will usually give you what the active runway is and what approaches are in use. Do you have to fly those approaches?
No. If they tell you to.
If they tell you no, if you want to fly a different approach, so you can ask for a different approach. If you try to land on the opposite runway to everybody else, you will probably get told no. There are exceptions, like when you're doing practice approaches. If you're telling me you want to do an approach to a runway the opposite way and traffic is light and you're not going to cause a bunch of drama, they'll let you do it. But most of the time, you're going to pick up the ATIS, all right? So you want to pick the ATIS up as soon as you can. I start to listen for it 100 miles an hour. Now around here, very rarely do you get it before about 60. And even then, sometimes you won't hear it until about 40 miles an hour. Sometimes you'll get passed off to the point where you're actually talking to an approach controller before you could even get the weather. All right? But you need to be listening for the weather. And then you get the weather. All right? So we're going to say, well, let's see, what's the weather at? Oh, damn it. Oh, there's KGPI. So right now their winds come 10 statute mile, blah, blah, blah. This weather is not the weather you will hear. The METAR is not the same as the TAF.
Isn't that information almost an hour old?
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, so they don't let you phone into the ATIS there, they let you phone into the ASOS. Otherwise, I would call it the ATIS. Because the ATIS, well, the difference between the ASOS and the ATIS is that the ATIS has that landing information. It also has information about like taxiways that are notamed out of service, those kinds of things.
I have a question for you. It's the same radio frequency. Would it be the same? Would it be on the phone number?
I don't think so. Usually when you call, you just, easy thing is to call.
Sky condition broken 5,000. Overcast 7,000. Temperature 0.2 Celsius. Dew point -0.6 Celsius. Altimeter 2,977. Remarks. Density altitude 2,400. Glacier Park International Airport, Kalispell, Montana.
Nope, just the weather.
0.
Because it would have been at the end there.
Yep. So, now so what runways do we have? 21, I think? 20. All right, so if we look at 20, we'll go to procedures. I'm going to tell you that they're landing on 20 so that we just have something to work with. No, we're going to land on 2.
2's a lot easier.
Yep.
Easy, just straight in.
Okay, so runway 2. At some point, they're going to tell you to expect an approach. Or you're going to ask for an approach. Oftentimes, they'll ask you what you want. So if we tell them we want the ILS-2, there we go, ILS-2, we're going to have to brief the approach. All right. Okay, so briefing the approach. You should have gotten the weather before you brief the approach. Sometimes you will not. But you should brief the important parts of the weather. And in the modern era, if you don't have like the live weather from the radio, you can use the satellite weather that you're getting or the ESPN weather that you're getting. So like I use a Stratus I have the weather on my iPad. If I can't hear the weather, I'll at least look at the weather on my iPad and get some idea of what's coming in so that I can say, hey, I'm expecting that they're landing visual or whatever. Then you brief the missed approach, and then the remarks, radios and RNAV. And that's when you want to start setting up your radios. Do it while you're briefing the approach. Dial in, if you're doing an ILS, dial in the localizer, the ILS frequency. If there are other radios that you can use as reference, dial those in while you read them off of the sheet. All right? Then time. So this one, I feel like I need like 6 arms up here. So you see here at the bottom, under the diagram where it says final approach fix to missed approach point. If we're doing 90 knots, it's 5 minutes and 52 seconds. That's the time that you want to make note of. So FAF to missed approach. And that's if everything goes to crap. You need to be able to identify the final approach fix and know when you can go, where your missed approach point is. All right? All right? So then headings and altitudes. You do not need to sit there and read every single heading and altitude off right off the bat. You need to make sure that you have confirmed what your final altitude is going to be and that you know where the step downs are. And so like flying into here, you end up with, we make turns as we're coming in, and we step down at each turn. If you have a fix, you probably have either a heading change, an altitude change, or both. That's usually why the fixes are there. Exception on an ILS, once you hit the glide slope, you just follow the glide slope. Or on an LPV or an LNAV VNAV. All right. So, all right. There you go. So this is designed for you to read from the top. All right. So you brief the weather, and then we are flying the ILS Localizer 2 to Glacier Park International. Our localizer's on 111.5. Dial it in then. Our approach course is 020. Decide if right now is a good time to set that as your heading mode. It's not always the right time, but you definitely need to know that at some point that's the heading you want to be on. All right. Runway length is 9,000 feet. Airport elevation is 2,900. Round those numbers. You don't need to memorize them because you're going to use the approach to get down. And once you go visual, you're no longer going to care. Does that make sense? All right. DME required, RNAV1, GPS, or radar required for procedure entry. Okay? So this specific approach sent me down a weird rabbit hole. What I'm going to tell you right now is RNAV, GPS can be used in lieu of DME, VOR, NDBs. So be advised that even if it says DME required, if you have GPS, you don't need DME. Okay? When we come in, we will see approach lights. There is a full approach light system. I never get wrapped around the axle about which one it is. On your written test, they're going to get wrapped around the axle about what an MALSR A5 approach light system is.
But it's in the legend.
Say it again for the cheap seats.
It's in the legend.
It's in the legend. All right? So don't try to memorize that crap. What you do care about is you know that because of the picture, there will be lights before the end of the runway with lead-in lights. All right? You also know if the tower's closed, you have to turn them on. How do we know that?
Boxes for them.
It's black with white writing.
Yeah.
Black with white writing. That,
Which is interesting, because every time I've been over there, they're on 24/7, like at night.
oh, do they?
They're just on.
Yeah, so these are, but that code means it's pilot controlled lighting. Don't count on it being on. If the tower's closed. If the tower's open, it's their job to turn on. All right, and then you brief the missed approach. Missed approach, climb to 4,100 feet, then climbing left turn to 12,000 feet on a heading of 190 degrees, and the FCA VOR DME radial 238 to Kili, 15.7 DME and hold. Continue to climb in the hold to 12,000 feet. What you need to remember from this is if you need to go missed, climb to 4,100 feet and then. All right? There's going to be a nice little graphic of it later down at the bottom to help you. All right? So...
This is the one that requires dual VOR, right?
Yes and no. So Dave's argument was that because it says dual VORs, it has to be dual VORs. I found the actual documentation from the FAA that
And
says
you can use GPS.
GPS can be used in lieu of VOR in all conditions.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
all right. All right, but now, so you should have already been trying to listen for the radio, but they give you the frequency for the weather. They always give you the frequency right here. You are probably already on 127.075. Glacier Tower is probably going to be your next. If you are on 127.075, you will not be getting another radio change until Tower. So put Tower in your standby. Don't flip it yet. All right. It is a good idea to put ground control in your secondary radio standby. Because sometimes when you land, it gets super, super busy. And it's easier to just flip over to that second radio than it is to have to program in another frequency as you taxi off. All right. So we've already programmed in the localizer. You know that the FCA VOR DME is going to be important to you, and it's on your chart, so you should put that in your second nav radio, if you have one. All right. And then when you're looking at the top-down view, you will notice the only two nav frequencies available on this chart are the localizer and the Kalispell VOR. Kalispell VOR is FCA. Why FCA is Kalispell? I don't know. Somebody picked it. All right.
Saying something about our neighbors to the north.
So.
That wasn't very nice.
Anyway.
That's on YouTube now.
Whoops.
And then what you will see is, depending on if you're coming from a feeder, for us, Olaby was on a route, right? Mm-hmm. There's a very good chance we could be coming from Olaby along this feeder route. So what does that Olaby feeder route tell us?
There's no procedure.
No procedure chart, that's good. Also, barring any other guidance, if we are cleared for the approach via Olaby, what altitude are we at?
9,000.
After we cross Olaby?
9,000.
9,000. All right, and it's going to be 23.1 miles to Gogs. And then when you get to Gogs, you're going to turn left to what heading?
020.
Okay.
So we do follow the God's approach. We don't make our own, right? Sure.
Pretty much by definition, you do not make your own approach.
Why
Sure.
not? Sure.
Okay, but so if you get the full approach and they give you a feeder route, they will tell you cross Olaby at or above 10,000 feet, cleared for the ILS approach. When you cross Olaby, you are now on an initial feeder route. It's a thicker black line. It has altitudes, bearings, and distance. That tells you that you can fly that route at that altitude if you've been cleared. if they tell you to proceed from Olaby, maintain such and such an altitude, and they don't say the word cleared for the approach, you have to stay at whatever altitude you're at, 11,000 feet.
We're using the ILS procedure. Runway 2?
Yep, this is
It's same plate.
Yeah.
ILS localizer.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, out here, this feeder route, you see the shape of the GOGS intersection? How it's that four-pointed star? What does that tell us?
It's GPS only.
It's a GPS waypoint. So you are using GPS to navigate to here.
That's why it says GPS or radar required for procedure entry. So otherwise you can't find the ILS to get
There you go. Okay? So, but when you get to GOGS and you turn inbound, what do we have to do, Callie?
Switch to your localizer.
You've got to switch to your localizer. You should have identified the localizer before you switch to your localizer. If you cannot ID the localizer, can you fly the approach?
No.
Nope. And then you have a mandatory report to ATC. Unable. All right? And then after you turn inbound, you notice there's a step down to 7,300 and then a step down to 5,800. Why are those step downs there?
Can't you set up on the glide slope?
Well, because it's the same approach plate as the localizer.
That's part of it. The other thing is you are not likely to have glide slope intercept out this far. You're expected to have glide slope intercept at 5,800 feet. So these step downs out here are necessary for the ILS procedure. You have to do those step downs. And also, we always come into a glide slope from beneath. Why?
So that you don't catch the false slope, something
False glide slope.
weird.
Yeah, the super steep false glide slopes that are found above the actual appropriate glide slope that is supposed to be somewhere between 2.5 and 4.5 degrees.
As a viewer flex.
You should write it down. That's how they write it on the test.
I can go re-listen to it.
Cal, you should write a book.
So until 1950, Glacier Park was known as LaSalle Airport because it was on LaSalle Road. 1950 got renamed to Flathead County Airport. And then in 1970, they renamed the airport Glacier Park, but didn't bother renaming the VOR. Hence,
So it's named after Flathead.
Flathead County. Yeah, so that's the county.
So FLA?
FCS.
FC, oh, Flathead County. Ah, okay.
Flathead
There's no
County.
A in county.
Better.
I don't get it. Where does the A come from?
Airport. Flathead County Airport,
Oh,
was
airport.
the name of the airport, and they gave the VOR the same name. Then they renamed the airport.
And now that we've gone down that rabbit hole.
I mean, if you fly commercially, they have.
But now we all know. When some student pilot asks us in the future, we can act all smart.
All right. So, as we're coming in, what are our minimums in 19 or 6, 9, or 8?
Does it have a
The
real
ILS?
ILS receiver?
The 698?
Does 698 have an actual real ILS radio receiver, or is it the GPS only?
6, 9, or 8 is a fully IFR capable aircraft with dual VORs, WAS enabled GPS, and a class 10.
Okay, but no ADF, no actual DM.
Nope.
Okay, right.
So what are our minimums?
Is it 6 and 2? Is that what you're asking?
So we're on an ILS.
Is it 3,166?
Yeah, this was not a trick question. There's only one ILS, one ILS option. All right, 6, 9, or 8. If we're flying this as a localizer, what is our minimums?
Yeah, 35 or 20.
440.
Oh, because we have dual
I guess
VORs.
4,000.
Yeah, so because we can identify the extra fixes, so we can go down to 3,520.
If you can identify Walnu,
It's bottom left.
we can go down to 3,520 and half mile visibility. We are a Category A airplane.
What's the difference between two localizers on the page?
So
One of them
if,
doesn't have two VORs.
if you cannot identify wall new fix,
Okay, okay.
and this is where the argument came up about dual VOR receivers required. Now we have dual VOR receivers, so there's no question there. But if you don't have dual VOR receivers, can you use can you use GPS in lieu? And according to the FAA, absolutely. So as long as you have GPS that can identify wall, it has to be in the database.
You could use the dual VOR.
You can use that lower minimum.
Gotcha.
So one of the reasons I wanted to do this plate, though, is there's weird stuff on these plates. And so when you read the plates, we want to go through and kind of question them all the time. Now, if you're in the air and you're coming down and you don't know, what do?
Use the higher one.
Use the higher minimums. There are dragons out there that you can't recognize, so don't try to outguess it. All right?
But if your glide slope is working, you can fly the SILS without dual VORs, right?
Yeah, that's why it's above that line.
Yeah. So you only need the dual VORs if you're if the glide slope in off that day or
Yep.
something, and you're having to go in.
And does that happen?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Right now, Coeur d'Alene's glide slope is out. Spokane's runway 3 glide slope is out. Right now. Today. It happens all the time. All right? So, knowing how to read the chart, all right? Now, you should not get blindsided by a glide slope being out because it's NOTAM'd out of commission usually before somebody tries to use it. It could happen. You could be flying along, it could go frizz, or your glide slope could work. In which case, then you've got to go to the localizer minimums. But you could still use the lower localizer minimums, assuming you have 2 VOR receivers, or you have GPS and WALNU is in your database. If WALNU does not come up, then you don't get to use it.
Where's the localizer minimum written?
There's 2 of them here. So the first one says SLOC 2.
Oh, no, okay.
Okay, so that's localizer if you cannot identify WALNU.
Gotcha.
And then S localizer here, that's the localizer minimum if you can't.
Gotcha.
And then you also have different circling minimums based on whether or not you can identify WALNU here. And, alright.
So if ATC clears you for ILS runway 2 at Glacier Park, and you find that your glide slope is not coming in, can you just do the localizer?
Yes.
Or you don't have to tell them, hey, we're switching over to localizer approach instead?
You should tell them that you're switching over, but you will not be told to discontinue. Unless it's on fire. In which case, I wasn't being facetious. If it's on fire or something weird is going on, they may cancel your clearance and tell you to go miss, because the nav aid you are using is not going to be reliable. But you don't need permission to fly the localizer in lieu of the ILS. Does that make sense? Once you got cleared for the ILS, you're cleared for either or, the way they're written. There are rare occasions where the ILS and the localizer are 2 separate plates, then you have to get a separate clearance if you want to do the localizer. Okay? And those, at this point in time, maybe like 5 in the United States that exist like that. And it has to do with whether or not the descent angles are right for doing the localizer. And just if the 2 plates can't be lined up exactly the same, usually they can't. So, I don't know if there are any left. There just used to be, if it's 2 separate plates, that's 2 separate approaches. If they're on the same plate, it's variants of the same flavor. If you're flying a GNAV, GPS approach that is LPV, and the vertical guidance is not working for some reason, but you are getting LNAV, you can just continue to fly it. You just have to do LNAV minimums. If there are LNAV minimums on the plane. That makes sense?
Does that also imply that, assuming you're going into a non-towered field, ATC doesn't care if you circle to another runway? Like if I'm cleared for ILS runway 2 and then most of the way down the winds shift and let's say 3-1 wasn't closed, or 3-0.
You are cleared to land on a specific runway. when you're
And
if you were on straight in
untowered field,
on an untowered field,
and they clear me for the ILS runway 2.
I have to go look.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, if I can
Because
circle.
typically you are when they clear you for a specific runway or circling.
Yeah.
You can ask for the circling on the way down.
Or you could just cancel IFR and then do whatever you want.
That's right.
Yeah. What happens when you cancel IFR?
They get sad because they miss you.
You crash into a hill and nobody knows.
Or that.
Well, they would know eventually.
It takes them longer to know you.
Now, when you cancel IFR, you lose the right to fly the missed approach. All right. Also, you are then responsible for cloud clearing. So, like today when we flew down, so why would I cancel IFR?
You can see the runway?
Because you were 16 miles out and you could see the airport.
Yes, that's half of it. What's the other half?
There may be other people in the pattern who you need to, I guess, deviate and move around and flow better with.
Yeah, potentially. Wasn't really what I was thinking, but yeah, it is VFR out. The other thing is here we know for a fact we lose radio comms. I can't just easily close, and so I have to go through a nut roll where I get on the ground and then I got to call 1-800 weather brief and explain to them I need to close my. It's easier to do it in the air, and it's my home field, so I know where I'm flying to. All right, it is generally a bad idea to cancel IFR when you're landing someplace you've never been before until you're on the ground. Unless you're on super short final, absolutely assured of being able to land.
So today they said cancel. They say cancel via flight service.
Yep, cancel via this frequency or via flight service.
So
if you call 1-800 weather brief, that's flight service.
They would have given us or they would have had a wait time on us, correct? Today, if we would have carried it all the way in.
You know, there's no void time. You are expected to close within 30 minutes. And the other thing is they want you to close as quickly as possible because nobody else can land here on an ILS clearance. That's the big courtesy. So kind of to your point, but if it's someplace you know the area, if you know what you're getting into, canceling while you're still in the air makes sense. Especially places like this where we absolutely know we're going to lose radio contact.
So, to go back a little bit,
Okay.
you mentioned, like, if something was on fire and they might send you on mist.
Mhm.
So, in that case, if you were established on the approach but not necessarily close to the mist approach point, would you just execute the mist approach procedure even though you're probably like 8-10 miles out from the airport?
Anybody know the answer to that question? Other than Wurzel?
Would you keep flying to the missed approach point?
So at least one person in this room has heard this answer.
Damn, it's me.
You are not wrong. Okay. What's the rule about going missing? Part of it you can do at any time, and part you can't do.
You can climb at any time,
Yes.
and then you have to wait till the missed approach point to make the turn.
Yes. The missed approach point, you are allowed to stop your descent or begin the climb at any point, but you cannot begin any turns until you get back to the missed approach point.
Okay.
And where this comes up is when you are in a circle to land and you aren't at the missed approach point anymore. You left it, and then you can't see the runway anymore. You are to turn back to the center of the airport complex and begin your climb. But you have to get back over the missed approach point before you begin navigating again. Because everything outside of that is no man's land.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been surveyed, there's not a plan. So you gotta get back to where the plan works. Now, if you're in a circle to land, everything, as long as you're inside the circling radius, and there are complex math formulas that tell you how big those radii are supposed to be and why the different altitudes for different airplanes. Bottom line is, if you turn towards the runway, you are in protected area. If you turn away from the runway, you are not. And the missed approach point on a circle of land is almost always the end of the runway. So, and over the airport is close enough. Like, especially if you've already climbed 1,000 feet, you know, you put yourself in a position where you're not going to smack into something unexpected. But think about this, like, actually, see if I can do this. Okay, so this is New Orleans. I think this is New Orleans downtown. No, come on. You are killing me, Smalls.
Is this like Four Flight Online?
Yeah.
Ew.
But, oh, crap. I had it.
A second ago.
Yes.
No,
All right, so this is Lakefront, New Orleans, right? But if we zoom in on it, so green, let me know what green is on a load and route chart.
Grass.
Coastal shorelines.
Grass.
All right. It is not grass.
Wow.
Wrong answer.
There's just this radius strip of grass.
Oh, look at that. It's grass though. Oh, that photo chart.
Okay. So I don't know if I can. I was hoping I could see. So 3-6 left. This is New Orleans Airport, right? This is the runway. But you end up, these are all tall buildings out here. Okay. So,
Good place to put those.
yeah, I think they were there first, actually. But, and then there's, like, over around in this area, there's a whole bunch of tall, like, gantry cranes and crap like that for the piers. So if you're on a circle to land and say you were circling this way, even though the missed approach for one of the approaches goes this way, they're expecting you to start that from out there and to follow runway heading. And so getting higher will never get you in trouble. Unless... See, I saw you snicker back there. I was waiting for you to bring the joke up. All right, but in an airplane, gaining altitude will never get you in trouble. You don't run into things going up. All right?
Unless you're under a bridge.
Exactly, Martha Lunkin. No, sorry. But you will get yourself in trouble by going left or right of a safe space. And you'll get yourself in trouble by going lower than the safe space. But so you can climb or stop your descent climb. So if the stuff was on fire and we can't continue the approach and we are 18 miles out, what you'll actually probably end up doing is just saying, hey, can you give me a vector and an altitude? And they will direct you around because they're not going to want to screw around with a full missed approach and all of that if they can get you out. But around here, we fly into places like Missoula. And to get into Missoula, you end up flying down a valley. Right? It's two big arcs that come in, and you go down this valley. They don't want a lot of deviation, but at the end of it, when you take off the runway, there's a big hill out at the end of the runway. It's not right up next to the runway, but it's much, much taller than our hill that's right at the end of the runway. So all of those things are designed to keep you from running into things. So it's get back to where the start point is for the missed approach before you start making turns in radical directions. So it's one of the reasons I have everybody here ends up with a circling with a missed approach, because I want to see if you can figure out what the right direction to go really is and climb. And here, if you're circling to land on 2-0, which by the way, you know you cannot circle to land on 2-0 at night here. It's not authorized. But if you're circling to land on 2-0 and you lose the runway, well, you're going to turn towards 2-0. Then if you look, that left-hand turn takes you that direction. So you're just going to keep climbing. Yeah, all right? And then you head out towards Webda. And as people that fly here all the time, Webda sits directly over the top of MacArthur Lake. So that just makes sense, doesn't it? When you leave here, what do? We aim for MacArthur Lake and climb. That's how you get out of here to the south. Am I wrong? So, all right. All right. So, all right, let's do KGPI. KGPI to KCOE.
Sorry, one more question on that last one. So can we take CARPS out of that flight plan and like just go to high tot?
So
we actually, when we flew there, we did get, it was right about over High Top, and they just said upon reaching 9,000, clear direct KGPI. So
the short answer is you can do whatever the hell you want when you file. What they'll give you becomes the question. They will almost always give you a reroute when you leave here and go that way. They just need you to be up at a high enough altitude that they can get radar contact, and that you can get on a vector that you are on their minimum vectoring altitude. Does that make sense?
I guess my question is, do we have to file CARPS.CARPS2 out of here, or can I file ZACB, HEROX, high tot, and then go somewhere else?
Yes.
Or are they never going to take that?
They not take it. I don't know. I've never tried it.
Okay.
But I'm
Most of the
telling
times you file CARPS, like we'll get halfway done the thing, they'll be like, all right, direct.
Yeah.
so they will file you direct.
With vectoring, everything's possible.
Yeah, you can file, and you may very well get cleared.
I want to try it.
Direct from here to there. Like you can literally just go, hey, I want to go 65 Sierra direct KGPI.
But it changes your fuel requirements, right? Because if my flight plan says I'm going to go all the way down to CARPS and then over it is an hour and 54-minute flight plan versus an hour 30, then I have to carry an extra 20 minutes of fuel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, just checking.
You can put it in. I'm just saying that for planning purposes, you're safer to plan an approved route and then hope to get better than you are to plan some swirly route. Now, the truth is, not that many people fly out of here. IFR, you're not clogging up, so you're much more likely to get it out of here. That deviation that you want, where you're not going to fly the whole departure procedure.
Yeah.
Then if you try to do something funky out of Phelps. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so
But they just brought up another thing. So I've already fueled up my airplane with the amount of fuel I want to have before I've done my run up and called them for my clearance.
Mm-hmm.
So if they give me a different clearance and I type it all in there and I go, oh crap, now they've added an extra 10 minutes onto my route and I don't have enough fuel. That kind of sucks.
You have to reject the clearance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unable. Now, when you file, one of the fields is fuel on board.
Does their computer know enough about your performance to know if they're going to route you?
When you
Your
file,
speed. You got your speed.
you file your speed. You file, and the fuel is in how many hours and minutes.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, good point though. When you get your clearance and you read it back, the next step is making sure it's doable. Does that clearance work? Can you fly? Something else, Rod Machado talks about it in the book. If they're going to route you over water and you aren't comfortable with that, you can decline that clearance. Now you go back in the queue and you know, it is what it is. But, all right. So, yeah, let's do KGPI to KCOE. Turn my... Okay, so looking at this one, just the direct route, this is one that to me is kind of a no-brainer to say, hey, if nothing else, let's get on the airway. Because basically we parallel the airway.
Like Victor 448.
Yep. And let's see, what does the route advisor tell me?
Why is there no ILS runway 6?
There is an
I
ILS.
mean, the other one. The other one.
The other runway?
Yeah.
So an ILS.
Only 2. 02.
So there's an ILS 02. You mean 20?
Yes, either of them. Yeah.
So one, ILS is expensive equipment, and you have to have a true ILS. You have to have the full ILS system point in both directions. Now they do sometimes have an ILS to one runway and a localizer back course to the opposite runway. My guess is, and I didn't look at this, so this is a guess, is that terrain in Kalispell makes that back course unusable. And so I've flown into Kalispell. There's some pretty good terrain a little ways out.
Yeah, to the east of it, but
Yeah.
What are you
I wouldn't say it looks like it impedes at all.
There's still, I mean, there's still terrain out here.
So
From Kalispell.
those are weird. So this is a good example where, like, when you're looking at it going, so they did Scott to Scott direct KCOE, Scott to Scott FCA. So somebody flew out to Scott and then back. Why would they do that? Altitude. To get enough altitude to get up to 11,000 feet. You got Ridge 1 Ridge class. Which that one looks all right. Ridge 2 Ridge Scott. So, yeah. To 11,000 feet. All right. So Ridge 1. So here's the nice box that says top altitude will be assigned. So runway 1, 2, and 30, you cannot use this departure. Runway 2, standard with a minimum climb of 383 feet per nautical mile to 6,500. So yeah, if you're taking off to the north, you have to be able to climb at 383 feet per nautical mile to 6,500. What does that come out to at 90 knots? What's the rate of climb?
What was that again? Or is this the Ridge 1?
383 per nautical mile.
Andrew, let's do it in your head.
1.5 times 383,
What
which
is it?
is about 600.
So you need about 600 feet per minute climb, and we are.
That's crazy.
So 600 feet per minute climb. Are we guaranteed that in a 172? No.
I can do it.
Yeah, because you pedal hard. Alright, so maybe we can't do the Ridge 1 departure. Alright? Now, actually, I told you 90, but we climb out. What do we climb out at? Is 19, 69, right? 80 what?
2.
82 what?
Miles per hour.
Miles per hour. So convert 82 to nautical miles, and then do the math. So 82 miles per hour, 82 miles.
I don't know the conversion.
Yeah, what?
E6B.
Use your
Wait,
6 feet.
how can you convert knots per hour to nautical miles?
No, we did not.
Oh, okay.
East and us.
I heard nautical miles.
He said nautical miles.
71.256 knots.
Yeah.
So 71, so we'll say 71 knots.
Yep.
So 71 knots, how do we figure out what that climb rate is?
It's 1.8.
What do you mean the 1.1?
1.18 nautical miles per minute.
Is
What?
it-
That's 1.18 knots. That's 71
So
knots.
71
That's
divided by
70.
60.
Yeah, that's 1.18.
Yeah.
333.
Take 71 divided by
Yep.
60 your speed. So
So
So then you multiply that
sure,
by
it's just like miles per hour.
It's
Yeah,
383.
minutes divided by an hour. You want to divide it by minutes.
that's 453 feet per minute.
Yeah, divided by 60 minutes.
That's closer to what we
That we can do. Alright? So, when you guys are sitting on your check ride, what you just learned is one, you have to be able to convert from miles per hour to nautical miles per hour, and then you're going to have to be able to convert these climb rates. What's the other way you can get the climb rates?
There's a chart called
Super complicated.
shows a FAA figure 72.
Yeah, so
If you look in your digital supplemental,
Yeah.
so go to Documents, FAA, Digital Supplemental, one of those as the chart.
I think it's 27.
It's just other form. Huge.
Yeah.
Don't need no
Find it?
your brain.
Instrument takeoff or approach procedure chart.
The problem with my brain, on the right side, there's nothing left.
It's a
On
climb
the
rate
left side, there's
table.
nothing.
Yep, so your ground speed and knots. So you just go between 60 and 90.
I can
Now, the
tell you
problem with
nothing
that
better than
chart
my notes.
Yeah.
is
I like it.
I'm sorry, what was the page it was on?
20. It's the last page in your digital supplement.
There you go. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So now the problem with that chart is it's like all other charts. It goes 60, 90, 120. Is it 60, 90, 120? Yeah, 60, 90, 120. When we don't fly at 60, we don't fly at 90, we fly at 71. And so you have to do this Buddha math there.
A lot of the questions say, like on we were looking at them
so-
on that prep work,
So
they
in
say
here, we
may
just be right there.
may
There's like
need interpolation or something like
Interpolation.
that. Interpolation, yeah.
So, what's that?
It's interpolation. Yeah.
So interpolation's a pain in the butt. But what you can, so what you can do, if you're supposed to use the chart, you just learn how to do interpolation. And usually, so they give you a number and it comes out. So the chart has 60 and 90, all right? So there's 30 points between that, and so they'll give you 75. And so that's exactly halfway between. And so then you just add the two numbers together, divide by 2, and you'll get. Or you can figure it out, like you can break it down and divide that into, there's, for every 1/10 of the division between, so it's 30 divided by 30. So for every knot, it's this much different, and then you multiply that and add it on there.
It's way too complicated.
Or you just learn to do the math and get the right answer. All right? And what I'm telling you, you will take your check ride in 1 9 or 6 9 or 8. So you absolutely positively need to know how to convert from miles to nautical miles. And you absolutely positively need to know how to then convert that into climb gradients. All right? And the trick is, you take knots and nautical miles per hour, take the knots, divide it by 60, and that tells you how many miles per minute you are going. And then you multiply it times whatever the number is. It's not hard math. It's not difficult math. And you're doing it on the ground, so you don't have to do it while the plane's bouncing around. All right? But you do have to decide, can I use this route out? I would say yes, after we did the math. Quick math said maybe. All right? And the quick math, the easy math to learn is 90 knots. 90 knots is a fast climb in a 172. All right.
90 miles per hour.
The reason I say 90 knots is 172s in general. If you approach at 90 knots, you can do a lot of the math in your head. It's easy. It's 1.5 miles per 1.5 nautical miles per minute, and so you can 1.5 is easier to work with. You can kind of guesstimate it, and if you have a big cushion after you do a 1.5, you can be like, yes, I can easily make that.
Well, 90 knot climb, 172 is going to be fairly fast. it's not going to be much of a climb.
Yeah, you're going to cover a lot of ground without a lot of rate of climb. You know, you may only get 300 or 400 feet per minute. So you need to make sure that you're working through that. All right? And you have to convert these to feet per minute because feet per nautical mile don't mean anything to you. Right? You don't have a gauge that tells you how many feet per nautical mile you're going to climb. Interestingly, you have one that sort of does tell you how many feet per nautical mile you're going to descend, and that's your GPS when it gives you a top of descent. But, all right. So, after excruciating talk, we have figured out, yes, we could do Ridge 1, right? From either runway. We did the math.
Just curious, 6, 9, or 8 can maintain 400 feet per minute up to 6,500 or whatever, like on a high density altitude day? Or is that like, I don't know that, is that easy for it? Or is that, like, if you have
It's
full
absolutely reasonable.
Okay.
I don't know, on density altitude, like a high density altitude day in 6, 9, or 8, that would not kind of.
So the other thing is you get, so that was the worst case of taking off on 020 going north.
Okay.
You then flip it around because it's substantially lower climb rate. You need 275 feet per nautical mile if you take off on 20, which is their normal departure. So
I was curious. So there might be some days when this is possible with light fuel and 2 people, and maybe not possible on high density altitude max loaded.
absolutely. Yeah, and the thing you have to check when you're doing your planning. All right. So right now, I wouldn't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you don't have, it's also important to understand, you don't have to maintain that to 11,000 feet.
Right.
You have to maintain that to 6,500. And then after that, whatever climb rate you can get. There is a mandatory report dealing with climb rates. You may know what it is?
You can't do, is it 500 feet a minute?
If you are no longer able to achieve a 500 foot per minute climb, you are supposed to report it to ATC. All right, so now here, I'm going to tell you they're going to let you take off on 20. So on 20, what do we do to get out of this place? Ridge 1 departure.
Take off runway 20, climb in 200 to 3,480. Then right turn direct across DAACE at or above.
It's supposed to pronounce. It's a pronounce.
Okay.
Right, correct.
So we took, so we took off 200, holding 200 degrees to 3,480 feet. Then we make a right turn direct to DACE, and we have to cross it above 6,300. So that's a mandatory climb. You have to be above 6,300. All right. And then it's a left turn.
Yeah. Then on track 208 degrees.
And you have to cross Pygmy at 8,300. Which, so you got to climb 2,000 feet in 5 miles. Can we do that? 2,000 feet in 5 miles. We're doing 71 nautical miles an hour.
Yeah. Should be able to do. No transition.
400 feet per nautical mile. That's interesting that that's not included in the requirements.
That just seemed like a short distance to actually climb.
And then you cross Ridge. What altitude are we supposed to be at Ridge?
9,000.
Exactly.
At 9,000. Okay.
With transition, do I put no transition in the option? For transitions? I'm trying to find the plate.
What?
The plate is just Ridge 1.
So, hold
And
on,
ask
so,
for transition.
okay, my dude, so go to Kalispell as an airport.
Okay, my dude.
Okay, and then you're gonna go procedure, departure, Ridge 1.
That works too. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you were putting it into your flight plan,
Yeah.
A little different.
and that's a little different.
Okay.
My dude. Alright. So, given these climb restrictions, do we suddenly see why maybe people were doing that other departure, even though it takes you on that weird out and back? Alright? So if you start working through this and you're like, I can't do that, then you go back to route planning and you kind of adjust what you're doing. I will tell you, I'm kind of sloppy about route planning because in the 340, I very rarely run into one of these I can't fly. So unless it says turbojet only, and then I can't fly it because it's turbojet only. All right, so and then this has, so you can go Ridge 1 Ridge. And you can either do Ridge 1 MSO, Ridge 1 MLP, Ridge 1 Scott. All right? And the plan we had in was Ridge 1 Ridge. Because it brings you out here, which gets you close. So let's see, where'd that go? Nope, wrong one. That's this point right here at 9,000 feet.
Why is it not giving me the ridge transition?
What? My dude.
Is he doing it too?
You can't go to the airport. You gotta go.
And then it doesn't give me a ridge transition.
No transition.
Transition for 2-0. And then it just does ridge 1.
Yeah.
And
That's
you
on
have
your
to
map.
figure out.
That just puts it on there.
So it's just 2-0 Ridge 1.
Okay, no, so good question.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Got a launch now.
If you're trying to put it in, you just have no transition.
Okay. So if you just want to go to routes.
So, and the reason it's phrased that way, guys, if you look, all of the routes go to Ridge, and then there's 2 transitions later, or you are exiting at Ridge. This is kind of the reverse of when you fly into an approach, and you can come in from a bunch of different ways, or they can fly you direct to the initial approach point. You can have IAPs and IPs that are all kind of stacked up with each other.
So there's a NOTAM on this chart that says change cross ridge at 9,000 to read cross ridge at or above 9,000.
Okay.
So apparently as of December 1st, they're changing that. Interesting.
Well, and that makes it easier.
Yeah.
Just a little. All right. So and then we're flying the same route that we flew before. We're going into Coeur d'Alene.
What the? You too.
Look at the name. So I just go.
Wait, where did you go?
That's
The
not
approach.
not a departure.
Where'd you get
Approach.
Where you departing? Where you approaching?
What does she have?
Oh, do you have more things than I have?
Wait, live in my place.
What'd you end up
Four
with?
things.
Oh,
KCCI Bridge.
Like on the map, it has the
I
outside.
was in the chat.
Yeah, that's because your subscription's a different rate.
Yeah, yours is fancy.
You have a pro or a
That's
pro
what I
plus?
said. Yeah, I was like, I don't
That's
have
the KCCI.
the little roller.
Okay.
Just do that to
What direction are the winds, the hypothetical winds at Coeur d'Alene?
The hypothetical winds at Coeur d'Alene are that we're landing on runway ILS runway 6. Okay, so let's talk about briefing this plate. Okay, so I've already just told you that you're going to get the ILS or localizer into Coeur d'Alene. was something en route that I skipped, and I skipped it going the other way too. We talk about handoffs.
Postage data.
Yeah.
Postage stamps.
Postage stamps.
Oh.
Come.
So when we left here, so we would have been on the tower, we would have taken off. Very good chance they would give you Salt Lake City on 127.075. All right. And somewhere close to this line that looks like the same kind of pattern as is around the boxes, Salt Lake will probably pass you to Seattle. All right? And you notice I said probably. Sometimes, for reasons that are only known to the ATC gods, the handoffs don't happen in the same place, same time, same reason. That reason is probably due to man. They'll make adjustments, and it depends on how far the radios can actually reach, those kinds of things. So, but you would expect that simple 196.908, contact Seattle Center on 123.905. And you say 123.905, 196.908. Dial it in, flip flop, wait a second, make sure nobody else is talking. And then Seattle Center, 196.905, 698. I'm changing the airplane tail number now. 196.908.
We changed airplanes, please help.
We change airplanes in flight.
Must be grateful.
We work for it.
Right? Please help.
Well, it's been half done.
That's the accent, I guess, yeah.
One done.
One guy did.
One guy.
Anyway, level 1000. 196.908, quarter lane altimeter 2992. It's always 2992 because I'm lazy. All right, so, but I did want to go back and look at that. All right. So,
You chose the class approach, right? For Berlin.
for
Class ILS 106.
So the class transition goes from here, flies down. Yeah, walk me all the way, man.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was a class transition. To hit that.
So, but hitting class makes sense for us. Why?
It's easy.
It's literally on the airway that we're flying. All right. So you take the class transition, and that way, if you lose radio comms, if you put class in your route and you lose radio comms, you know you can fly class at 7,900 feet, 240 degrees, direct to the Coeur d'Alene VOR. You take the Coeur d'Alene VOR out on the 231 radial. You'll do a procedure turn. In this case, how do we do the entry? So we're doing a hold in lieu of a course reversal, yes. How do we do it? So I flew in from here, 7,900 feet to here.
Turning right.
Turning what?
Right.
Do
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Teardrop entry?
Yeah.
I like a teardrop.
Two right and two.
So strictly speaking, this would be a parallel entry.
Oh,
You would have to come in from the top left, right for a teardrop.
Because you're coming straight in, you're already on that line. You should do
The right turn.
a parallel turn, right turn, in and in. Now, because you're using it as a course reversal, you don't have to do turns in the circle. All right?
So you just go back in.
If you were cleared for the approach. So you would just go out, turn, come back in, send her back up,
Is that what it's showing?
and then you would use the ILS.
Is that what this is showing right here? This little. What is it?
That is 100% what that is showing.
That's
That's a course reversal.
So it just gives it to us. That's cool.
So if you are flying on the line already, you're the expectation is you do direct. Would you be wrong to do it to your drone?
No.
I think it's legal in real life, But you wouldn't want to do it on your check rides. They want to see you do exactly what the FA wants on your written.
You are 100% correct across the board on all of that. Yes, you can absolutely legally come in and do a teardrop entry where you come in, turn 30 degrees off course, fly out for 4 nautical miles, turn, come back in. All right? Yeah, 100% legal. On your check ride, he's going to ask you why you did it, and it's hard to give a good reason other than because I wanted to be established on the center line further out. So,
So procedure turns are hard is not the right answer.
there you go. Now, what you can do is you don't have to turn 270. You can turn 300 degrees. You can make that intercept tighter or looser if you want, whatever you're more comfortable flying. Usually, looser is better. You get a more gentle intercept. That's the word I was looking for. Intercept.
Once we've made that turn and once we're on the intercept to the line, we
So-
can now descend, right?
Yeah, so I gotta scroll it up to see. So we flew from here to here at 7,900. Then we can, if we are cleared for the approach, we have to descend below 6,800, but we have to be above 5,600. All right. And if you're really high for some reason, you can request turns in the approach, in the circuits in the pattern, but you have to ask for it. You cannot just keep going around in circles. They are expecting you to do nothing more than the teardrop. Than
Parallel.
the parallel entry. But, so you come down here, and then you should be at 5,600 when you're headed back inbound. Okay? You also have to report when you are headed inbound. All right. And then you have a step down after POIB, so the initial approach fix. And you notice this says it's an intermediate fix and an initial approach fix. So you have to do a step.
Because of the course reversal, or why is that?
Yeah, because it serves two different functions, depending on which way you're coming from. They can actually fly you direct to POIB and tell you to do the approach. You would really not want them to. So other than class, you also have this hilly that is a possible feeder route. We wouldn't use it. All right. And this has a really complicated misapproach. Andrew, you want to read the misapproach for me?
Climbing to 2,900, then climbing left turn to 6,000 on the COE R350 outbound. Then climbing left turn to 6,500 on COE R350 inbound to COE VOR DME and hold.
Okay. So let's look at this again. So we climb, then we make a left turn, and we have to intercept the radial 350. So this implies that we need the COE at least in our standby radio. All right? Because you go out, climb, left turn, intercept this radial. Then you fly out until, what's the altitude? And then you make a left-hand turn. You come back, you hit the same radial, you come in. All right? And what's the entry for this one?
Direct.
If you have to cross that,
It's a parallel.
that VOR,
You have, you go to the VOR.
VOR,
You go to the VOR, you turn outbound, you fly for 1 minute, because this does not have leg lengths. So you go for 1 minute, turn around, come back in, and then this has left-hand turns. So yeah, that misapproach is a pain in the butt. but it's all based off of the COE VOR.
I don't want to fly the Coeur d'Alene.
What's that?
I don't want to fly the Coeur d'Alene anymore.
Now I know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Yeah. And we're in the same. Thanks.
Alright, and then this one's straightforward. If we've got the ILS for 2491, do we have the ILS? Is it still notamed out?
Yes, it's 6 nodes. Yes, there is no precision approach.
No precision approach or no glide slope?
Pappy's out of service.
Glide
No precision.
ILS runway 6 not monitored, monitoring, unmonitored.
Anyway, 6 precision
Okay.
approach.
Anybody else know something weird that's happening in Coeur d'Alene, Sue?
I think I need a control tower. It's a temporary tower.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's coming in May.
1st of May.
Is that just going to be a standard thing now?
Well, they do it every year for the fires.
Well, they normally do it like when it becomes a big fire hub. But they're like jumping the gun this year.
Well, they have a new
They-
airport manager.
Well, and they want to get a permanent tower, but a bunch of crabby old dudes are really mad about it.
Oh, join
I think they're going to get that control tower anyway. And you shouldn't join them because they really
They need a
it.
control tower.
me. That place is the Wild West.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a zoo.
Okay.
I'd rather fly Glacier than Portland.
So now you notice this one does not have a little time box on the bottom. So the other ILS had a time box. There's no way to use time to determine where the final approach fix is. Or the missed approach point is, sorry. They just don't give it to you. Because you're supposed to use DME. Or
GPS.
in lieu. That's the magic phrase. GPS in lieu of DME. GPS in lieu of VOR. GPS in lieu of NDB.
GPS.
If there's a NOTAM that says ILS runway 06 not monitored, does that mean it's not usable for IFR?
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
I could be.
But I've heard the VORX is unmonitored, on different NOTAMs in the past. So it's useful. Okay.
Maybe. I'll make a note to do a little research on that. Alright. So we are 2 hours in. Alright. So we talked about go, no-go decisions last week. This is the one where I'm telling you, personal minimums. There's a worksheet. You can just literally Google FAA personal minimums and pull it down, take a look at it. It's a good idea. I don't like how it's executed. It talks a lot about like what you have done in the past kind of thing. The important thing is what are you comfortable doing, and then what are you willing to do? Where are you going to draw those lines? And I would say initially saying that VFR, I'm not going to fly unless VFR is at my destination airport, is a valid answer. It's to say, I'm using IFR initially to get out of places that are hard to get out of, to get up above clouds. I'm going to use the en route process. Also, our aircraft are not icing equipped or de-icing equipped, so you don't want to stay in the clouds. You want to get through them. So that what we did today was like the perfect example of where having your instrument rating with a 172 with no icing is awesome. Because you can pop up, get on top of the clouds. We could fly on top of the clouds all the way to where we wanted to go. And then get there and be like, well, damn, how am I going to get down? And it was, 50 feet of cloud?
Yeah.
So, but for us, old timers would just dive through it. It's illegal, by the way.
Or go find a hole somewhere, circle down really tight, get below it, and then come in. Yeah, there's all kinds of stupid stuff to do when you don't have an instrument rating.
There's a reason there's a plane on Romanex.
So, for us, early on, saying, hey, my limits right now are that I will only land at an airport that has at least 1,000-foot ceiling and 2 miles visibility. Absolutely reasonable. And by the time you get done doing your instrument stuff, I would say you would all be capable of doing 1,000-foot ceiling and 2 miles visibility, which is slightly lower than VFR. Only slightly lower. and that way you stay out of trouble. I have a rule that if I have ceilings of less than 1,000 feet forecast at my destination, I automatically do an alternate, even if I'm not required. In fact, I do an alternate every time. Truth be told, I just always have an alternate in the box because if something happens, it's one less thing to think about. You know, this is what my alternate's going to be. All right, personal minimums. Familiar versus unfamiliar. The other thing is, the sheet doesn't do this, but you should have personal minimums for places you are very familiar with, and those should be lower than your personal minimums for places you have never been, because you've never been there. You know, you don't know what you don't know, and then as you get more and more skilled, you can adjust those. All right. All right, clearance delivery, we already talked about this. IFR holding clearance. This is the order it's going to come to you. Now, the trick is they will sometimes say something without saying it, and that is the direction or the where you're holding. They can tell you, like, if you're on Victor 200, to hold on Victor 200 south of the VOR. And that is telling you a specific radial, because Victor 200 is on a specific radial. All right, you have to sort that out. But so they will always, they'll give you a direction, a fix, and either a radial or a course. What's the difference?
So a radial is coming off of the VOR or some navigational facility?
Yeah, technically they can give you a radial off of any point, but radials come from courses go to.
Right.
All right, and they can give it to you either direction. So you need to pay attention to that. Direction. Right turns by default. If they don't give you a direction of hold, it is a right-hand turn. If they tell you left, it's left. And then altitude, they may or may not give you an EFC. If they don't give you one, you should probably ask for one. Unless, like if you're in Spokane approaches area and you've got 2 radios in the plane and everything's been going fine, don't have an aneurysm if they don't give you an EFC. But if you are out in the middle of the Dakota Badlands in a hold over the middle of nothing and the radios have been sketchy the whole time, ask for an EFC. You have one handheld radio that you have to stick out the window. Ask for an EFC. All right. So, non-radar environment. I'm going to break this down. I kind of danced around this for a while, and I finally found a way to really just simplify what you actually have to say. So you have to report compulsory points. So those are filled in or a filled in waypoint. If you're not in radar contact. You do not have to report every single point along a Victor airway. You do have to report any point where you are going direct to navigation. So if you go direct, if you leave the airway and you scooch along, like over here, if we left the airway here and we went this way to this airway, you'd have to report this point and this point, even if they're not compulsory reporting points, because you left the airway system.
So you report
and you got back on.
And the compulsory ones that are along the route, if there are any?
If there are any that are compulsory, you have to report all compulsories. So if they're filled in, only if you're not in radar contact. If you're in radar contact, you don't have to report any of this. None of it.
Is this also a VFR thing, or is this just IFR?
This is IFR.
There's no VFR compulsory reporting points. Okay.
No, you don't have to talk to anybody VFR unless you're inside.
No, you don't have to have a radio.
That's true. That's one.
Okay. So where to report? Then this definition of direct routes. If you leave, if you fly straight from here to Coeur d'Alene, you have to report passing here and when you get to Coeur d'Alene. If you've lost radar contact. And I'm kind of hammering the if you've lost radar contact. It does happen out here. Our terrain is rough enough and equipment goes down and all kinds of things. All right, but what you report, this is what screws people up. and it's FAT, So fixed altitude time, fixed time fix. Which sounds really stupid when I say it out loud, until you understand that it's the fix I'm going over now, the time I actually crossed it, because we've all tried to get on the radio and tell somebody something, and 9,000 airliners are deciding to tell us what's for lunch. So it's fix at what time and what altitude. So what was your altitude when you crossed the fix that you were supposed to report? Then you tell them what your next fix is and what time you expect to cross it. So you have to look on your nav log and do the math. I crossed, if I crossed fix 1 at 0020 Zulu, and it's going to take me 13 minutes to get to the next one. The next one should be at 0033 Zulu. And then you tell them the next fix after that. So it's the fixture crossing, time, and altitude. So FAT, fix, altitude, time, then the fix and the time, and then the next fix. Okay? Strictly speaking, you only have to tell them the mandatory report fixes. If you tell them the other ones, that's okay. If you tell them ones that are like intermediates, if you over-report, you're okay. If you under-report, it's a problem. All right. But this FAT, I would write that down somewhere to put onto your cheat sheet, because you won't memorize it. But if it comes up, you can always look it up.
That last fix is a fix after, so the first fix is the one you're crossing, the second fix is the one you expect to get next, and the last fix is the one after.
Yeah, it's not the end of your flight. It's the third fix in the next sequence. And then when you get to the next fix, you would report, I'm over the fix at this time, at this altitude. Next fix at this time, expect next fix at this time. And you can literally just go, I should have prepped this, but like, you're flying out of here and you go, Herox 0030, Hitot 0042, expect CARS. And that's it. You don't have to put a bunch of fancy words in between. It's just fixed altitude time, fixed time, fix.
And is that one of the things where you should say level before saying your altitude?
Nope.
That was something else?
They know if you're level or if you are climbing, you should, fix your altitude is 6,000 climbing, or your 6,000 climbing 10,000, and it's always 6,000 climbing 10,000, 10,000 descending 6,000. Not climbing 2, not climbing 4, but just use those words. Another weird little pet peeve: when you're arriving at an airport, people will sell a novel explaining, like especially at an untowered field. Flying into Boundary County, expect to land runway 20, I don't know, you get these weird novels.
All traffic, please advise.
Yeah.
We're gonna fly out 10 miles and join them at 45.
Exactly.
Midfield.
The answer is Boundary County traffic, November 19 or 69 or 8, 16 miles south, landing Boundary County. Because you will decide what runway you're going to land on when you get closer. All right? And then when you do get ready to land, I am a big fan of full stop, touch and go, expressing what you're actually going to do when you're on the downwind. Downwind 20, full stop. Okay. So we talked about this last week. I just want to reinforce this. There are 3 kinds of approaches. You have precision, you have APV, and you have non-precision. But APV are flown to a DA, but they're non-precision. It is entirely a regulatory semantic game, but you need to understand that.
I didn't get that.
Nobody does, Siri. So understand the only precision approach that you are likely to fly is an ILS. If you seek one out really, really, really with diligence, you could potentially fly a precision approach radar approach. What equipment do we need for PAR?
Radio.
Look at that. He really wanted to answer that. That's the most enthusiastic I think I've ever seen you. All right. So APV,
Lucas?
you are going to fly a ton of APV approaches.
You did that on purpose.
All right. And APV approaches are flown to a decision altitude, but they are not precision approaches because they're guided by GPS. And then flown to an MDA are all non-precision approaches. You will do VOR, you will do localizer, and you will do RNAV GPS. And I've been very happy to know that every time I ask guys what does plus V mean in the airplane as we're going into Deer Park or here, it's guidance only. Don't trust it. Now today we use the plus V to teach you how to use the glide slope indicator because we're in visual conditions and I can look out and I don't care about just busting out the bottom of a step because we're not on an IFAR flight plan. Right. So that's something that if we do it and I tell you we're using the plus V as a glide slope, it's just for a training opportunity. And in fact, we were testing the autopilot to see if it would grab the glide slope and just bring us out.
And it did.
It did. It was pretty cool.
Very nice. I can just sleep and then just. Honestly.
Maybe not sleep.
Let's play a game called What Hazardous Attitude Is That?
Tired.
Complacency.
All right. So weather brief. So when you brief the approach, there's no magic answer to this, but sort it out and practice briefing plates. Just open up plates and brief them, and pretend you're sitting there putting the numbers into the radio, or come in here and sit at the TD2, pull up an approach plate, and practice briefing it. You should brief the weather, always brief the missed approach, and then you start at the remarks, and it's that top set of boxes across the top. But don't brief every single thing on the plate. Brief it like you're telling your co-pilot all the things they need to know. And as you brief it, set your equipment. Set heading bugs, set altitude bugs. Those of you that have flown with me know I'm all about use all the bugs.
Yeah.
Set your heading bug, set your altitude bug, set your heading bug, set your altitude bug. Have that plane help you fly it. You know, we've got all this fancy crap in there. So, this is a briefing format that Gold Seal teaches. They call it Weather Martha. WMARTHA. Okay? After Martha King. I think somebody went to a lot of work to make that line up with Martha King. Right. So we talked about this last time. Landing. All landings are executed visually in the end. So I've had 2 people on approaches be seriously high and land perfectly safely. Okay? On your check ride, if you come out seriously high, what do you do?
You can circle.
If you're on a circling approach, so one of them was on the localizer alpha, and the localizer alpha at Sandpoint. Yes, that was her. What does it mean when it says localizer alpha?
It means it doesn't. It's not a straight-in approach. It doesn't bring you into a runway.
Right, it brings you into the airport.
Mm-hmm.
So the localizer alpha at Sandpoint's interesting because what is it?
It does bring you sort of straight into a runway, but the descent angle is too steep for it to be considered a straight-in approach.
Okay, so but can you legally land straight in?
If you can see it, yeah.
Absolutely, you can legally land straight in from a circling approach. That one I know without hesitation. trick is if you fly it by the numbers and you see it like at the last numbers, you're going to be too close to the runway to do what's considered a normal approach. On your check ride, do the circle. And in fact, my suggestion is, Callie knew what to do. She was explaining what she was going to do in the plane, and I misunderstood what she said. Because she said turn right.
Well, yeah, I
You would-
was gonna turn right so I could circle left.
Sidestep.
Yeah.
Sidestep, keep the runway, because that way you stay nice and inside the runway safely, inside the bounded area. Make a nice left-hand turn, enter left traffic. When you do circling approaches, generally speaking, if you can, you just want to fly what's roughly the pattern, as close to the airport as you can, safely. Because if somebody else is doing something wonky, they'll be in that pattern. All of the pattern areas are selected because they protect you from a lot of space, and it generally keeps you from pissing off the neighbors. It's noise abatement stuff. So you're usually, so like at Sandpoint, both sides are left, both runways are left-hand traffic. But if you're going straight over the top of the runway, move to the side. So sidestep right a little bit so you're not directly over the runway in case somebody's taking off. All right, stabilized approach concept. And this is what you'd be violating if you did what you did and you did.
It feels very accusatory.
Really? Did you not
I'm going to make it more accusatory. Both of you did a very good job. In fact, it is a testament to your instructor that you both knew how to slip the plane down, get us down, and correct it as high as we were. And real world, I would tell you all day, do that landing. On your check ride, don't. On your check ride, and both of these don't line up very well. It's interesting. I'm surprised ours is considered a straight in, but it's because it's only 14 degrees off. But
What's the 30? Is it
30 degrees is the magic line. But, so, I would just be, I'm going to circle the land. You come in. I do all your research to make sure that you're allowed to circle the land if you were cleared. You wouldn't be able to circle the land here at night.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if you were doing the approach at night and you were that high when you saw the runway, what would you do?
Go missed.
Thank you. Go missed. You go missed approach, you fly the missed approach, you come back in, you shoot it again.
Go missed again.
Go missed again. All right. And we already talked about land and hold short.
Yeah.
All right, so missed. Always plan to fly the missed approach. Minimums are not met, aircraft's not in position, or the conditions go below minimums. So if you're almost to the runway and all of a sudden fog magically appears in front of you and you can no longer see the runway, and the update to this slide is cram, climb, clean, call, suspend. All right? And if you guys can learn, and the way I would like to see that when you're flying the plane is when you get to the missed approach point or you get to DA, if I don't tell you to pick up your stuff, that means you can't see. I just want you to do it. All right? In fact, that's kind of the rule when you're flying IFR. I am there to coach and guide you. I'm not going to let you do something that's going to hurt us. But I don't know if you've noticed, those of you who have now flown with me, I don't actually tell you to do a lot unless you need it.
He mostly tells you what you're not doing.
Yeah.
You do very often hear from me things like, are we going to?
Where are we going, Callie?
Your eye.
So, what's that?
Slip the land. You're gonna slip. You're gonna slip.
Are we
Are
going?
we going to get down?
Are we going to descend?
And actually, that's a very common refrain. Are we going to go down? And you guys will be doing 300 foot per minute descent. And I'm sitting there going, you are not going to get to land this airplane. In fact, I'm going to tell you, after about your third flight, if you don't make an 800 foot per minute descent on step downs, you are going to go missed every time. Because you aren't going to get low enough in time to see the runway and execute a proper approach. So, get down. But all of this is about you deciding when you're going to do things, how you're going to do them. not to pick on you, but I've been picking on her. So, like today, when you would cross points, we would fly for 15 seconds after you would cross the point before you would start to descend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nope. You want to anticipate that, and the second you get there, you pull the power, you begin the descent, pull 300 RPM out, or 400 RPM, whatever it takes to get that 800 foot per minute descent going, because you need to get down. You should have to level off before every set down, if you're doing it right. If you are just clipping the steps, you're not descending fast enough. All right? And then when you get to the missed approach, I want you guys to understand that with me specifically, if I don't tell you that you've seen it, you have not seen it. All right? And if you take off your visor and you can't see it, go missed. Because it may be that you overflew it. It may be that you're straight up and down from it. You look out, if you're flying to Deer Park, if you look straight out ahead, you might not see the airport because it's actually off to your left on 16. So, I mean, after a while, you do them so many times, so it's going to be over there. Part of briefing the plate should always be looking at that top-down view and seeing what angle the runway makes with where your line comes down. And then mentally, if you've got a big wind correction in, adding those degrees to which direction you look. But don't wait to be told to go missed. And when you go missed, so for example here, what is the first step of the missed approach here? Anybody know?
Climbing left turn.
Okay? That is not climb straight ahead for 20 seconds and then start turning to the left. That is add power, start climb, and turn. And the reason for that is there's a big hill out here. Alright. Skipping the taxi. Use the diagrams, and if you don't know where you are, stop and ask. Get a progressive taxi. So, Callie, do you not have a ForeFlight subscription, or do you just have the base subscription?
I just have the base.
Okay. I am personally of the opinion that at least going the one level up, I can't remember what they're called, it's like Pro and Pro Plus, but going one level up, because that gets you geo-rectified plates. Your plane will show up on the plate, and then when you switch to plate view, and you see the plane on the plate view, and you can read the plate without like trying to look through the map, it's easy to toggle back and forth. Also, when you taxi at a big busy airport, you can see where you are on the taxi diagram. And when you add an approach or a departure in, it gives you the altitudes tacked next to the things. Those are super handy. And in the sim, I don't let you guys connect to the Bad Elf GPS, partly because I just want you to learn to fly the plane, and partly because I'm trying to set you up for something so that when you're taking your check ride, Perry doesn't question your ability to use what's in the plane. That's why I also don't let you sit there on the map page. But that said, if you are flying and you feel the slightest bit disoriented, it's your plane. You're the PIC. Reach over, click over to the map view, and go, okay.
You don't have to say bad words in spoken. You could just look at the map.
You can look at the map and see where you actually are. But then go back. The other thing is, that screen I put you on the 400, which is actually, I believe it's called Nav1. Nav2 is a map. Nav1 on a 400 is not a map. But that data is more precise. And make sure I show you how to change what those data blocks are so that they're organized the way you like them. Because I have deliberately changed one of the boxes to cross-track error because it tells you how far you are off the course. Instead of, it used to have something that I don't remember what it was because it was useless to me. I don't care. But if I know I'm only 0.01 miles off of the course, okay, I can be gentler with my regain than if I'm 3/4 of a mile off the course. All right? And secure. This slide was in the last one, but I don't know how I never picked up on this Music Mixture Master Mags.
Say that 5 times fast.
No.
Yeah, if you get that, so always turn off your avionics before you pull the mixture. Then pull the mixture, then shut the master off, then turn the mags off. Alright, no matter what plane you're flying, and this was Nicole's little mantra as we were shutting down, and that's great. I am a fan of leaving the beacon on, leaving the beacon switch on. If you ever fly one of my planes, I want you to leave the beacon switch on, because then if I forget to turn the master off, it usually happens while you're pre-flying the plane. Because you have to turn the master on, do a bunch of stuff, get out, walk around the plane, and then you get distracted and you fail to turn the master back off. Well, then you run the battery down while you're doing other stuff. So if you walk outside and you have a red light going, whoopie, 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 it just tells you left the master on. Also, if you do it in a hangar, it looks like you have a disco going. So, all right. So, and then close your flight plan. You do not want them launching search and rescue after you.
Maybe I do.
That it can get super expensive. So, when I water landed the plane in the lake, when the boat picked me up, I asked to borrow their phone, and the first number I called was 911, and the conversation I had was something along the lines of, "Hey, I am the pilot of the airplane that just landed in the lake. I was the only one on board the plane, and I am safely on board a boat. Do not send rescue. It is not necessary." And the dispatcher said, "Okay, can you meet us at this boat ramp?" And the boat guys were like, "Well, yeah, that boat ramp's right over there." And I said, "Yes, we can meet you at that boat ramp." And when I got there was an ambulance, a fire truck, and the sheriff. No, 3 vehicles. And the county sheriff looks at me and he goes, "We just wanted to tell you thanks. You saved us $250,000 by making the phone call." Because that's, what's that?
It's probably a really southern accent though.
Oh yeah.
He enjoyed it.
He was as good old boy as they come.
Yeah.
But his point was that the initial response immediately cost them $250,000 because of who all they have to call out. And by being told, "Hey, there's nobody in the plane," definitively, they checked me out, and he was very clear. He's like, "There's absolutely no charge for your search and rescue. Do not worry about that." But
And that's how you got away with murder?
now that we're still streaming. So, my point is, the search and rescue, it's expensive, and if they find that you were negligent, if your negligence caused them to have to send a whole bunch of stuff, they will charge you. They'll send you a bill. And
$100 million bill.
if you don't call it off, it's going to be a lot more than $250,000. They start dredging a lake for you. Holy cow. Anyway, so, but when you land, close your flight plan. One, you don't need search and rescue launched out after you. And they don't go there immediately. They call the airport. They call the airport manager. They call the owner of the aircraft. They call the number that you put on your flight plan. I always put my phone number on there because, if nothing else, I'd rather they call me first. But what happens a lot of times is guys actually do turn their phones off while they fly, and they haven't turned it on. They didn't. Not only did they forget to close their flight plan, they forgot. They had to go to the bathroom and they ran in and haven't turned their phone back on. Blah blah blah. But if you close your flight plan, you stop all that. The other thing is, you got 8 guys out there hanging out in orbits because they're no longer allowed to land here because you've closed the airport down because they think you might be a ball of fire in the middle of the runway.
They could look at the runway.
What's that?
They could just look at the runway. There's no ball of fire.
If you're in,
Seattle Center can't see our.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Oh, Seattle.
Yeah, they don't have a camera on this.
Like even here, if they called somebody would have to drive over here to look. Then you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know.
don't make them have to call me, because then I get reason to laugh at
You have a
you.
$40 call out fee.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody, did you guys get anything out of tonight's exercise?
Very much.
Understood the approach plates a little bit better.
And so what I want you to do now is go and just pick random destinations. Pick 2 points and then try to plan, okay, what departure would I ask for? What kind of route would I want? And then look at the approaches in and start practicing briefing the approaches. When we go flying and I give you an approach, when I say brief the approach, I want you to have a plan. Oh, yeah, I think I told you to tell me this today. No, it was you. You were supposed to tell me, build a passenger brief.
Oh,
All right? So look in the regulation. There are specific things that you are supposed to talk about. One that I can tell you for a fact is seatbelts. You are required to brief how to use the seatbelts. Emergency exits are another thing. There's a
Where
list
the
of
ashtrays are in the airplane.
it's important.
I don't think ashtrays are in the mandatory part of the brief.
I know.
Probably for
Yeah,
seven.
I can show them.
Cool there.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. You know, Nicole's nicotine habit is substantial.
It's horrible. Yeah, it
So-
gets out of hand, guys.
But
Over in Zen.
so one of the things that will set you up just for success is when you are going through that checklist and you get passenger brief, you treat your check rides as if that guy's never been in a plane before. And so have a professional prepared, I'm not saying memorized, I'm saying prepared passenger brief for that plane. And right now, all of you that will take check rides in 19 or 69 or 8, these things I talk about, like know how to calculate what the nautical miles are, and then how to use that to convert your climb rates, so that you can do it without thinking about it. What's up?
On my check ride, actually, Perry didn't close his door because I didn't cover it in my brief. I gave him a brief, but I didn't show him how to specifically close the doors. And so he didn't close it. And I saw it right before he started taxiing. I was like, oh, here he goes. This is how you close your door. So, yeah, gotta have everything. Because he just left it open. So it's like,
Okay, but this is the whole point. Perry's job is to see if you can safely take somebody up in an airplane and get them back down in the bad weather. All right? So everything you do needs to be geared towards that. Everybody I've flown with so far has made the comment when they get to checking the vacuum system. We don't have a vacuum system in this airplane. All right? Which is true. Why don't we have a vacuum system in that airplane?
We've been converted to electric.
Yeah.
Glass panel.
So it's converted to a glass panel, and specifically, what allows us to do that?
Money?
Supplemental type certificate?
Or was
Yeah, so AHRS, but you have to have an AHRS and a magnetometer. See, you're headed down. So if you read in the manuals, it will tell you that you can only eliminate the use of the vacuum system if both of the 275s have batteries and if there's a magnetometer in the system.
for the 275s?
That's what they're
Did you
still
get
around on
the
Garmin 275. So, but that's exactly what you need to be able to do. It's like you need to be able to walk through and say, this Garmin 275 replaces the attitude indicator, the airspeed indicator, and the altimeter, and the vertical speed indicator, and what happens when it fails?
The other 275 takes over.
There's a switch on the side that you can
Oh.
force it. It's called revisionary mode. You want to learn those things. So, for check ride purposes, not written test purposes, but for check ride purposes, you really want to know everything about what makes a 19 or 69 or 8 a valid and legal IFR platform, especially given that it doesn't meet traditional standards for setting it up. All right? So, and I'll kind of hammer on that as we keep going along. But the big one is it's glass panel. It has revisionary mode. It's almost impossible for me to properly do failure modes, partial panel in that plane. So we're gonna do them. We're gonna do the crap out of them in the simulator because I got a 6-pack that I can fail every instrument individually with switches. that's one of the things we'll use the simulator for, is to make sure that you know what happens and how you identify failures and those kinds of things. And then in that plane, we're going to talk through, all right, yeah, when you lose power to one of those, what actually happens? I know Callie knows. What happens when power fails to one of the 275s?
Andrew.
Turns off.
No, not
Flashing through one of the batteries.
Battery takes over.
closer.
Instead of testing Andrew, why don't you just tell that like an ass?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ask me?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I wasn't listening. No, so there's a external power lost gray, really dull bar that comes up for about 3 seconds. And that's all it says. It's gray, it's very muted, it's not like loud at all saying, hey, by the way, something's wrong. No, it just comes up and it's like, hey, by the way, external power was lost. And then it's like, you don't need that anymore, and then it goes away. And then there's a little green battery symbol that comes up in the top left.
It's not that useful.
Does that battery symbol like discharge as the internal battery is losing power?
That one I don't know.
We didn't let it run long
Yeah, we
enough.
didn't let it run long.
So, but yeah,
How long does it guarantee you? Do they make a
I
promise?
believe it guarantees you an hour.
Is it an hour? I would have guessed half.
so
Well, half an hour for the battery. Like
half an hour for the aircraft battery, and then you've got,
yeah.
but the internal batteries are an hour.
I think they're an hour.
But that's right. The instruction manual for one of those 275s, the user's manual is 300 plus pages.
I know.
So, but Google it, download it, and learn it. All right. Google the autopilot and understand the autopilot. And then when you're flying on your check ride, until Perry tells you he's failed the autopilot, use the autopilot to your advantage.
Actually, if you have a working autopilot, you're supposed to demonstrate one approach with it.
So
You have to use it on one approach.
So that's why we were practicing using it today, was to see how does it react, what do we care about, when do we, those are not to the ground approved autopilots. So after you cross the final approach fix, you have to disconnect the autopilot and hand fly the last part. But,
Every now and then that autopilot, we did break the floor. Some of the steps were like 20, 30 feet. Would he care about that? Because the autopilot kind of doesn't, because of wind and stuff like that today. Would he be mad about them?
Yes.
Yeah, he would.
-0.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't bust.
Well, so that was my question as well.
so I have to look something up. I know that the standard says that you cannot descend, it's plus 100 minus 0 for your final altitude. So I went through and was doing a whole deep dive on what the standards are. I have to go back and re-look because I confused myself. I don't know that actually applies to steps. The steps,
Up and down.
yeah, on the step down. Your final approach, your decision altitude or MDA is absolutely minus 0 to plus 100. So don't let the autopilot bust that.
And from my understanding, it's like every part of like the approach that brings it down, you can't go under.
And
All
I
of
thought
them.
so too, but in my reading, it caused me to go, I don't know that that's actually true. Now, when you're en route, I know for a fact it's plus 100, minus 100. And then if you get more than a 3/4 scale deflection, that's a fail. So
every time we've flown.
that's a 1.5.
Yeah, we don't really have
So that's something that was kind of coming out today.
diamond.
You have to get the CDI centered. Get the CDI centered, and then keep it centered.
With diamond.
Yeah, but and the drift diamond that's up on the top, don't get wrapped around the axle on that. Your focus is on keeping the CDI centered and then keeping the glide slope centered.
Autopilot was doing it really wild because we were like 15 degrees off just to keep on. Because we had that.
Because we had a ripping wind.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any questions for me? I understand some of you guys are coming every Thursday, studying together. That's awesome. Keep that up.
Next, I'm going to
Hmm?
Tristan's house, right?
This Thursday is Tristan's?
I don't know.
Okay.
So,
I can't make it this
yeah, we didn't take a break, so
Andrew's going to be a thumbs up.
what's up?
When I take it there's a miss button in 698.
So there's a button that says go around.
There's that.
I need to do some research on what that actually does. What I know for a fact is if you hit the OBS button and unsuspend, it takes you directly into the missed approach. Callie and I flew an entire hold on the autopilot with the missed approach. And we never hit the go around button. And I don't know what the go around button is supposed to do. I know what the OBS suspend button does.
So my question is, will it, if you're on autopilot and you already know that you're not going to go to the land, but you're not to the missed fix yet, if you decide, if you use the autopilot or you suspend, will it continue to lose altitude down to minimums?
I'd have to check what the autopilot does. When you hit suspend, you can take it out of approach mode though and just put it in altitude hold.
Oh, okay.
Well, looking at the ACS here, yeah, it does look like just for the minimum descent altitude, plus or minus, or plus 100 minus 0. They read it in such a weird way, but yeah, up top it says plus or minus 100.
So maybe on that last leg you turn off autopilot just to make sure that you don't break the.
Well, you have to turn it off anyway because this is not the autopilot will not fly you to the pavement.
Okay.
So yeah, as a general rule, somewhere were you taught to do it like a mile before the final approach fix to put in your approach flaps? Do you remember anything like that?
It's weird, I feel like I hardly remember putting flaps in at all and they're coming down on most everything.
So what you should do though is sometime around the final approach point is put in the first notch of flaps and slow to what is going to be your approach speed,
Like base speed.
which is 80. In this plane, it's 80. So put that one first notch of flaps in. Do not put any more flaps in until you can see the runway. There's no reason to be putting extra flaps in the suit, okay? But you want to get in the habit of putting that in, and you want to get in the habit of slowing down on final approach to that approach speed. And then short final is 70. So it's 80, then 70, and then you just fly the plane from there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not rocket science.
Well.
It's aerospace engineering.
Yeah, I was gonna
It's not
say.
rocket science. So, no, I think everybody's doing well so far. I did figure out I was using the syllabus a little wrong. I didn't realize the syllabus had the simulator flights in the ground school portion. So I've been going back and as we're doing flights, I'm making notes in the flights. I skipped all the things that we don't normally do in the simulator. Like I can't really evaluate your ability to pre-flight an airplane when we're using a simulator. And so I just came back to note on those. But so for these first few actual in-airplane flights, I'm going back and checking those out. They also only have 6 hours of flight simulator time in the syllabus. So, and we're going to get more than that by the time of that. So, other than that,
Thanks for taking
Want to shut off the stream?
I want to shut off my stream. Thank you.